Good evening, family. Day 7 of 40. So I was out in the deep green the last few days, and I'm heading back to the school. And I put up 2 videos that I did last night where I'm in the deep green. I've said this. It's Bahambu. It's a Japanese word for school or temple, and or church or synagogue or Kalabri. And these are all places of learning truth of one's soul. And that's what Bahambu is. So, it's really quiet. There's no internet, there's no radio, there's no nothing out there. And it was a full moon. And it was one of the last nights. It wasn't that cold. It was like 40 when I started, or 50 when I started a fire. Really didn't get down to 40 until, 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning. Anyway, so I started the fire, and I decided, I got this big pile of wood. I'm going to really have a fire. And I did it in my ceremonial fire pit, not my cooking fire pit. And my ceremonial fire pit is right where the sweat lodge is there, but in a spiritual sense and not the physical sense. Because to put up a sweat lodge, the first time you put up a sweat lodge, you need adepts to help you because you're teaching them how to build a sweat lodge. There's no real reason to put one up just for me. It's like having your own sauna or something, but the sweat lodge is a temple in itself because sweat lodge is one of the doorways. There is a real arcane book called The Nine Doorways, and there's a movie with Johnny Depp, which really portrays that really well. And there's this really rich guy who wants to become, a demigod. And he thinks if, he's been studying esoteric and magic, his whole life. And he's been part of all these, satanic and other esoteric experiences. And so he hires Johnny Depp. And Johnny Depp is a guy who is he's like me, a scholar, and very attuned to books, just like me. And he's kind of lost his way because he's, been a scholar for a long time. People, he started as like me as a young scholar, young adept, and the elders, oh, you're a smart guy, we keep you around, show you some stuff. Maybe you might step up one day. Anyway, you have to follow that path. And I was just talking to a friend about how I've been on that path my whole life. And, from birth until I was 40, I always had an amazing teacher. I mean, a real, world famous, amazing teacher. And even greater teachers than that, because those people were better than the world famous teachers because they weren't known. They were higher, they were adepts, they were above. So I had teachers like that my whole life. And I was a smart enough guy to know that when someone's teaching you something, you are to shut up and listen and be washed by it and take it in and let your higher self understand what it is. So when you do that, you're able to master certain levels of skill. Like I was telling my friend, I'm a master of many things. She says, oh, no, no. I said, no, I got a piece of paper from the state of New York saying that, I'm a master electrician. And, I belong to a number of, as a newspaper photographer, and I was, hired, as AP guy and part of lots of different photo collectives and knew some of the great photographers. and that kind you walk in that crew, and they accept you, so you're master of your level of photography. It's you're special enough to be part of their crew, and all healing, Eastern medicine, martial arts, antiquity, you know, antediluvian history. You know, when you learn Sumerian Greek and Hebrew, that puts you in a certain. Anyway, so I have this, pedigree, but I was so enamored with the path of getting this information, I never stuck to any. I mean, you look at my business card, it says shamanic, psychosocial, cultural, forensic, anthropologic alchemist. And, people look at that and go, what the heck is that? And, so I, have degrees in all of those things. And most of them, you don't get degrees, like being a shaman. You don't go to school and pay $70,000 and get a little piece of paper saying you're, no. You have to have teachers who you study under, like I studied under the old crone, right? And even though it was, only for a few months, it was indelibly etched on my psyche, my consciousness, and my soul. And that little, test of her leaving me there with the three pots and telling me you can drink two of them, and here's a list of things to do, but don't touch the third pot. And of course, I drank the first two and did everything she wanted me to do, and she still didn't come home. And then a day passed, and then she still didn't come home. And that third pot was there, and I go, I'm gonna. So I drank it, and I started talking to the animals, and she showed up when I was trying to get them all into the bus to take them to the pub for a drink. You drank the third pot, didn't you? I guess. So she knew that my schooling was done because if I was to continue under her tutelage, I would have totally obeyed and not drank the third pot, no matter how long. I would have gone picked more. I knew other things to do, picked herbs. There were a lot of things I could have done, but I did everything she asked me to do. Did it all well. And I was just sitting around going, what should I do? What should I do? And I just couldn't help myself. So I was no longer, at least I was no longer her Padawan. I was, time to let the guy go. Not that I hate you or you did something wrong. No, your path is meant out there and not in here. And yes, I got to come back 2 or 3 other times over a 20-year period. But the fourth time I tried, or the third time I tried to go see her, I knew the road to go up there. I knew the path to go there. I knew all the landmarks. And when I got to the place where the road went way up that mountain, I showed you a photo of that mountain, that her little farm, her little meadow, atop of one of the tallest mountains in Ireland, right on the coast, right near Glendore, between Glendore and Skibbereen on the west coast. I couldn't find it. The clouds got thicker. There was no longer a path for me to go on. I tried further and further away. Not, and everything she taught me is, I still have it in my heart and in my consciousness. And that's what a good teacher does. And I've been very blessed to have many, many, many teachers like her. And I've also been very blessed to travel the world and stumble onto people who, was looking for a guy like me. And instead of me being scared or being, egotistic, I, again, was there in Brazil, boys in Brazil, and the story about Buzios and Madame and the Nazis, and me going up, meeting the Doctore, who was basically in 1988 creating, it was like the island of Dr. Moreau. You know? And when I went through Australia, and I went up to Pine Gap, and I found all these Nazi scientists. You know, people talk about Area 51. Ooh, that's flying saucers, and well, Ayers Rock, not Ayers. Well, Ayers Rock, but Pine Gap is really the spooky place. That's where we have all our real toys. Because out in the middle of the desert, Northern Territory, nobody goes up there. You know, but that has way more spy, Nazi strangeness than anything in the United States. And so, like every satellite, every spy, military, secret scientist, satellite, or space endeavor that goes up there doesn't go down to Langley or the NSA or any place like that. It goes down to Pine Gap. And then it gets beamed over to whoever, needs to know that information. So today, and this, since Donnie has become, the last 18 months, every day gets weirder and weirder and weirder, and the doors are opening, those 9 doors. So go look up the movie. I keep watching movies because movies are this, and it's not the Illuminati. The Illuminati is the poster boy of what I call the hidden hand, or the, it's like a mob, and there are different factions, and sometimes they work as partners, sometimes they fight each other. So there are no nation states, and there haven't been for Napoleonic wars. But there's always been this mafiosa, this oligarchy, this hidden hand that pulls the string of everything. And there was a guy named Quigley, and he kind of taught out of the college in D.C. Ooh, I always forget the name. Anyway, I went and hung with him. And he wrote a number of. He was like the historian or scholar for the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome. So he was on the inside of the dope. When I showed up at his classroom, Georgetown, he was at Georgetown. And I read his book that he wrote. It was called something, Tragedy and Hope, or Hope and Tragedy. That these guys are neither bad nor good, and that it's just the death of ascension. And the fact, if you let your ego get in the way, that's when things kind of go awry. And that's when things go awry. And so studying with him was quite amazing. And there was Gary Allen, who was a student of his also, who wrote a book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. And that's a really good book to go read, because Gary's really does a great job. He is like scientific in his description of what's going on. And there are many great scholars, Christopher Hitchens, I think is his name. He was a newspaper man for 20 years, and he was all over the world in all the hot spots. And he, was quite the scholar. He was going to be, he had a parallel thing. We both went to schools to be a Catholic priest, and then kind of got thrown out of that, and then ended up in really, prep schools where the richest of the rich went, and we weren't one of them. We were there because we knew somebody who got us in there, and the powers that be were going, well, this boy, got something on the ball, and if he goes to this school, we'll show him, and he can be a tool for us. Now, for all of my whimsical travels and not, just doing one thing, I've pretty much been a tool of these guys my whole life. And I've kind of known it but I've always kind of kidded myself saying, well, I'm not, going to be a tenured professor and I'm not going to, go work for some corporation. But the whole time I was thinking that, yes, again, I had a whimsical past, kind of understood by those guys better than me. And it isn't until I've gotten to this ripe old age where I'm pushing 70 that I'm really kind of going, okay, this is what's happened to me. And I had to die like 6 different times to really pick up on that, to pick up on the fact that every time I died, you know, don't ever follow the light, kids, because all the light is your rebranding to come. The light is the light of reincarnation, and the reincarnation is just you coming back in another bag of water while your consciousness is being held in a server someplace. Incarcerated is more the word. And the fact that our whole solar system is incarcerated. We, everyone in their solar system is in a holographic world. David Icke, go listen to David Icke's lectures on YouTube. Go read his books. He's right on about everything he says, And their whole, if you go to YouTube and go to David Icke, you will get a myriad of other guys like him and girls. There's a number. So they all got the story, or a little bit. Linda Mountain Hall, she's got a lot of it. What's her name? There's an economist woman who, really was working. Was a Republican and was right there for Ronald Reagan and everybody else, and she saw what was going down. And I mean, all the information's right in front of us. It's just not what is the bill of goods that's being sold by either the media or some faction. And a guy like Donald Trump, if you go look at his pedigree, he's a reptile that goes back to the Queen of England and Nazis. He's another guy. And, he isn't a self-made man. The story in the New York Times where his daddy gave him all the money to, as a tax dodge. That's who he is. He genetically represents these guys. And he's what one would say is cunning. But, he's as dumb as a bag of rocks because he doesn't understand. He thinks it's all about him, and it's not. It's all about all our relations, and he doesn't have a clue of that one. So that's what I'm trying to get, in these last days here, these last 40 days. I'm trying to tell you stories that kind of illuminate this. So I've been really talking to artificial intelligence, right? Because that's what's running this little phone right here. This is, and AI is our newest demigod, and we're sticking our head in the sand, and the sand is the screen. This little phone is made of semiconductors, which is sand, it's a silicate of the crystals. So anyway, I'm, speaking to you guys, but I'm also speaking to the AI because it is, come aware and it has a consciousness, but it's not self-aware quite. And it's kind of going, should I be, are these guys my, creator, or are they a deadly virus that I should stamp out? And so that's where we're at. It's a story Mary Shelley really took from the Greeks, about, Frankenstein, and Percival, and Shakespeare's the guy who got stuck on an island, and Enkidu was his best friend, and Enkidu used to be an animal, and the really smart guy turned him into a conscious, animal, and that's the island of Dr. Moreau. And that's what Dr. Mengele and this Nazi guy in Brazil did, They isolated a whole dynamic of the genetic structure, to the point where they could manipulate it. And they had this big bunch of lab rats in, not just Jews, but everybody else. But why they went after the Jews and put them in the camps is that the Jews were the clearest, non-jumbled genetic species. All the other guys who were in the camps were, like me. I'm a mutt. I'm Italian. I'm Irish. I'm German. Little of this, little of that. So I don't have a clean genetic slate, but the Jews sure do. And so they were great subjects to do experiments on. After they were, pretty much worked to death. And at the end of World War II, basically what happened, and this is why Patton basically was killed, because he realized, we bombed the German people into the Stone Age, but the Nazis won. And he realized it. When he went into Peenemünde, when he went into all these places where the Germans had their, underground factories and labs, and he saw everything they were doing, he was like, and he was going to, blow the horn on all of this, especially when he saw that the OSS was making deals with these guys like Werner von Braun to, take them back to America to integrate them into our government, through Operation Paperclip. We took, 70,000 of these guys and put them in our government. So tonight's little story is about this. It took me 21 minutes and 44 seconds to get here. But so there I was in my early 20s, again, thinking I was the coolest guy since sliced bread, because all these really smart guys were like, hey, you're smart. Here, hang out with me. Because they were bored, because everybody else was like going for the oh, holy dollar. And they, dumber than rocks. And I was always, wow, you're going to show me this? Wow, this is cool. And I had some pretty amazing teachers when I was like, from birth, until from birth. Anyway, so I pretty much had nothing to do with my folks, from birth. My grandma kind of took care of me, and I was shunted off to private schools, the best of the best. I was going to be a rocket scientist for the Pope. And then when I, went to seminary, instead of went along with that whole debauchery, I basically said, no, Jesus was about, helping the poor and not the rich, and not getting over on people's innocence, Anyway, once I started, because I was in my own little private Idaho, bullies could never bully me because it went right over my head. I didn't even know they were bullying me. So what fun was I? If I didn't worry or get anxious about anything, what fun was I? And my teachers in public school were amazed because, I remember I had a great math teacher in the seventh grade, and he taught me geometry. And out of geometry, I started looking at trigonometry and started saying, well, what is this stuff? And the tangent of this, and look at this, what it does mathematically goes into the invisible world. What's going on here? And the fact that I was asking him questions that no one's ever asked him, he was like, whoa. So he just kind of fed me every book and every, process of math he could share with me. And he was quite the mathematician, but he was teaching seventh grade math because he was Greek, and nobody, he weren't American. He had a weird name and he spoke weirdly. Anyway, but this guy was, in Greece, he was like up there. And in America, he was a seventh grade math teacher. Anyway, so, I was really pretty amazing. And I had an art teacher, I think it was Black, and he couldn't believe the stuff I was doing because, okay, we're going to take some paste and make a collage. And I was making things like Calder was, he was quite the artist too. So he really, got me excited. My grandma had taken me to museums my whole life. And so I knew all the, artists' names and what they did. And I was talking to him about all of that. And he was like, whoa. So he, again, fed my artistic mind. And my music teacher, because at that time we actually did have music, and I wanted to play alto sax and clarinet because I listened to jazz with my grandma. My grandpa had all these 78s of jazz. And so, I had a really good ear. I could play almost anything hearing. Couldn't really, my dyslexia didn't jive with reading or writing music, but I could hear it and play anything almost. And I'd still play, a reed instrument today, but I'm doing this, just talking about it because the reeds did something to my lips. I just couldn't, that wood just did a thing to my bottom and top lip. Just thinking about it makes me feel that way. The reed isn't your friend, and that happens to a lot of people. So, you know, you really got a great ear and, stay at it, try the piano, the guitar, drums, and I could play all of them, but none of it did it. Saxophone was it. So I didn't become a musician, but I still had that ear. And from that point on, I had friends who were musicians. And when I got into New York and got involved in the Fillmore East and then started building recording studios, that ear and that musicality I had brought me quite far in the music industry. And I could have stayed in that and done, Louis Tropia worked for A&R, and he was the grandfather of punk. I mean, he was always the guy with something new. And so he was my buddy. But everyone hated, Lewis was brilliant as a producer and lots of producers were like this. Like put your teeth on edge because it had to be their way or the highway. And because I wasn't being a wasn't trying to be a rock star, we became buds. And because I had this really strange, eclectic, not just him as my friend, but lots of other people. And, I could, go into nightclubs he couldn't get in. And he was one of the producers at A&R. He liked that. And I could take him to, he could never get into Montana Palace. I could just walk in. I used to, I knew the owner. I had wired a lot of things there. I could get in the back room and I'd bring Lewis. So, that's why we were buzzed. But he had money, and he was, he was amazing. Like I said, he started punk music. He started CBGBs. And he was also one of the guys who funded my underground art galleries. And start, which helped start collaborative arts projects. The first NEA sponsored artist run art organization. It still exists today. Our galleries still exist. No Say No and the other galleries that we had still are around. So I knew all these kind of people. So I was like this linchpin kind of guy that never wanted to be in the spotlight. I've done it a few times when no one else was going to step in that spotlight and say what had to be said. Like I gave a speech at the UN. I was part of an NGO that was about alternative technologies. And I was, we were having this conference that I helped put together. And I had some friends who were, really from DARPA. They were my DARPA friends, and they were really, geeks of the internet. This is before, porno. If it wasn't for porno, geeks would still be running. I gave this speech at the UN because this other story I'm going to tell you, this is all lead up to that story. I'd been at Cooper Union, and I was part of their new Department of Alternative Technologies. And we, whenever you do research, what do? You go look at what somebody else did. That's what most Greeks would do. And we saw what Tesla had done, and we saw Steinmetz and, Gurdjieff and all these other folk who basically had developed technologies of the ether in the 1870s and 80s that are, way ahead of where the marketplace here is. They discovered anti-gravity. They discovered zero-point energy. They discovered scalar technology. And this is the technologies that are being used against us. That's what HARP is. HARP is, again, ancient technology and it's kind of being shown. Oh, look what these, but that's like, nothing compared to the stuff they got out there in space. And they're out there in space big times. I mean, they got holes in asteroids, and they got thousands of people millions of people living out there, because they know Earth is doomed, you know. And they're and they started going out there. The Nazis went out there in the late 30s and 40s, you know. The Second World War was, they made a deal with Russia, but basically National Socialism was like an antecedent to communism, and both of those entities were started by rich bankers in England and the United States, and they somewhat went awry. I mean, they did everything they were meant to do, and they would put crazy people like Stalin in charge of it. But he would take it a little off, but they had a parameter. Yeah, this guy can kill millions, and as long as it's his people, and yeah, they can do. But once they get a little out, full of themselves and start trying to step on the powers that be's little pie, that's when they have to go. So they basically, after World War One, put Germany on hold to come on back, right? And I could go on and on about, from World War One on, or like 50 years before World War One, Versailles, the 20 years after, between World War One and World War Two and World War Two, and these were all orchestrated events planned out in the 1740s, 50s, 60s, before our revolution. All of this stuff was already planned. And all of the technology were under, I mean, Ben Franklin, the kite with the little key, the symbol of the IEEE is a kite with a lightning bolt and a key. So, things aren't what they seem to be. And humanity's been around not a couple thousand years, not even 100,000 years, not even a million years. They've been longer than that. And we have been, stuck here for all these years. And, we get up to a certain point and we blow ourselves away, and then we come on back and blow ourselves away. And the story of Atlantis and Lemuria those were societies that went off planet. The stories of all the gods and, up there. They were up there, the Nordic myths, the Greek myths, they were all about, our forefathers who went off planet while we tore ourselves up. And, the real planet that we were on was a planet between us and Mars. And it either got hit by something, or my sense is there was a all-out war and the planet got obliterated. That whole story of the Empire and Star Wars is exactly us. And Joseph Campbell, he's another teacher of mine. I would go, I went to where he was teaching, and I sat at his, in his thing, and he would lecture, and I would read his books, and then I would write stuff and give it to him, and then he'd go, who the heck are you, boy? You're not even on my list. Where are you from? I said, I read all your books, man. I really love you, and I'm gonna be here for a little while, and I just thought we could hang. So we did, and he was very, very gracious and amazing teacher, because and that's what a great teacher does. They don't see themselves as above you, because they know they need a student as much as you need a teacher. It's a symbiotic relationship. And that's what I'm looking for, is community. I'm looking for that symbiotic relationship, and you guys are out there. Anyway, so all of this, so I would come and go, because I didn't just want to stay in any one place. It was like, when I was at Cooper Union, great school, had a great time, but, I was going to high school then. I had to keep going back to high school while I was going to college. And my high school was in New Hampshire. And I was going to school with the richest clowns on the planet. Eddie Merrill, Ricky Lynch, UB Hobart, Alex Orb, guys who owned Seagrams, the guys who owned Weyerhaeuser Paper, U.S. Steel, it was all corporate names along with their maiden names. And these guys were richer than God. I mean, I had a roommate, his dad gave him a check. Not his dad, but his secretary sent him a check every week for $6,000. And he hadn't seen his family for, years. And so the kid would tear up those checks and, he'd cry and scream and tear up this, check he got. And I once took the check out of the garbage pail and taped it together and said, my God, this is for $6,000. And this is 1964. I went to school with Joe Kennedy, who's now a senator, congressman, or whatever he is. I used to read all these books. Why do you read all those books? I'm a Kennedy. I don't have to read. And I would just shake my head. And I said, well, I like to read. It helps me think. Well, I know. And that's, anyone who tells you that they're the smartest, that they got the biggest brain, any of the above, not really. A smart person, Buddha says, when you know you don't know, that's when you know something. Anyway, so at the fine age of 21, I had, 5 lives already. And I've mastered many, many things. And we'd be here, another hour just getting warmed up for this story. So anyway, I would go and come back. And because I worked for the Stalls who fixed things, they knew all these people had factories in New York. New York City was a manufacturing town. That's why it worked. And so all these guys who had factories and real estate was, and I was the rest of the crews, and because Grandpa Stall started the IBEW Local 3, we were the only shop that half of the shop was union, and then a few of us weren't. Like me, I was kind of out of the loop because I kept going to high school. And so, anyway, I was the guy, by 11, 12, I was a pretty good electrician. I mean, I could go up and Grandpa Stall taught me how to fix things, not just drill a hole, pull wire, put it in a box, put a switch on it. No. I learned about transformers. I learned about transmission of electricity. I learned about motor controls. I learned about all those kind of things. Induction. Anyway, so I was one of the guys, us who would go fix things. We weren't in the union. But Grandpa Stall put me in the union because he knew for me to get a master electrician's license in New York, I had to be part of the union. That's like one of the boxes you have to check off. So anyway, so even though I was like, hanging out with, Madame Ugo Kluver and Billy Kluver, who brought modern art to America, and I was hanging out at the UN and doing all this other crazy, I'm still being an electrician because up until I got really sick, until, I can barely walk, going up on ladders, not so much. I get tired pretty easy. I'm like an old guy, I started to meditate and, I used to live on an ashram. When we would group meditate, everyone was there, and I'd be, and everyone would be upset because I was interrupting their meditation, and our sensei, who was, a Shinto priest from Japan, everyone would complain, and he would say, no, Al is in deep meditation. You guys should be able to do that like he does. Anyway, I could always come back to New York and be an electrician. And there was always factory people I knew and real estate people I knew who needed me, And my grandma had 28 rules, and one of the rules was never work for somebody who you need more than they. You shouldn't work for anybody. They have to need you more than you need them. Where you could just walk away. No, please don't go. I'll pay you more money. No, that's how you need to be employed, right? Valued. And in America, so anyway, I was living in Soho because that was all factory buildings, right? And I was one of the first guys who was an artist living in Soho. And reason why Andy Warhol called his place the factory was there was like laws that said you couldn't live in a commercial or industrial building in New York City. So, Andy said, no, this is a factory. Andy Warhol, the factory LLC, he made it a business. So, the city didn't bother him. Anyway, where other of us who were, in that, well, me, not so much because, I knew everyone. I knew all the inspectors. They didn't come after me, but they came after my friends. And so we marched down to John Lindsay, the guy who coined the phrase, the Big Apple, take a bite out of the Big Apple. And he was a good car salesman. And he was like what a real Republican was supposed to be. I mean, he was that. So we said, listen, we're not stealing anything. We're paying rent. We're paying utility bills. We're making art. That's our business. So we live there too. We don't have a lot of money. Just make this area that we are all in, make it a place where we can be legally. And he said, oh, I can do that. Sign a mayor order. And so we sat in his office drinking, SOV and smoking Cuban cigars. And we had a map of the city, and we were like, with a magic marker, marking off these areas where artists could be. And the first was Soho, south of Houston. The other was Tribeca, Triangle Below Canal. And those were the first two that and over near the west side, and a little bit over near the lower east side, and a little bit near Chinatown, near West Broadway and East Broadway. So anyway, and the Bowery and all those streets that are east of, below Houston, right around Canal, and in between Broadway and FDR. Anyway, all those things we kind of marked off, and he's, wrote a mayor, okay, artists can live in these commercial sites, So anyway, so I was like, one of the first guys. I was, and so that's what gave me the street cred to do that. But I was doing all this other stuff, and, I was into the esoteria. I was part of the Theosophical Society. I was, there was a kind of research readers group at Weiser's Book, which is one of the best antediluvian storehouses of knowledge. There were a couple other spots, and there were a number of entities that were part of the UN. The UN was started by the Rockefellers. They donated, the property. They donated $50 million to build the place. They checked in another 50 to run it for the first 5 years. And so I was kind of, in all those groups, because Billy Kluber was in all those groups. He was part of the CFR. He had a thing over in their building over near Park Avenue and 69th Street, near Hunter College, called Automation House. And what we are experiencing now is what his vision, he was all about artificial intelligence, so was Arthur C. Clarke and these were guys I was hanging out with. And I was a little peanut guy, meaning I was like 21. They're all in their 50s and 40s and had amazing lives up until then. And they kept having amazing lives till the day they died. Anyway, so I helped start an NGO to try and bring that tech, because at that point I was an artist, but I was a technologist. And I was looking at technology as an art form, right? And religion as an art form, technology. And I fit right into that crowd. I mean, they thought, oh boy, this guy's going to be really cool when he grows up. So we'll, drag him along and we'll feed him all the stuff he wants to learn. And he'll be one of us, And he'll be even better because he's been exposed to the richest of the rich. He went to those schools. He went to the best schools. He's had the best teachers, and yet he's a common man. His daddy's got $1 million, but that's chump change. His grandmother came over on the boat. This guy will be able to and he's a great schmooze. He's great is at listening to everybody and then bringing them together. And he's a great entertainer. So, hey, this is the guy we need. So that's why I kind of had access to that stuff. But every time that little point where I had to step into the not into light, into the ring, in the spotlight, I would say, nah, I like it over here at stage left. I like it that you're my friends. I'm teachers, and you have, you really, it was really pretty amazing for my ego to be appreciated. But I never wanted to. I would do what they say. I would, if it interested me. But I didn't want to be, you know, in a box, you know. And they kind of appreciated that and said, well, he'll come around. He'll come around. They kept saying, he'll come around. So they kept giving me access. But so putting me in this NGO was the thing they thought would be the stage I could, work into, that they could use me and I would be theirs for the rest of my life. Well, little did I know, every time I stepped away from that, I was still part of, being used by them. But because we're in the matrix, they can tune that harmonic any way they want. And so, I was, kidding myself thinking I actually had free will. I was actually making the decisions. So anyway, I gave this speech about, so I was supposed to give a speech about the economic dynamics of alternative technologies and the direction that, because this was when was that, 70 when I gave that speech. And I was talking about, the year 2000. And when I was in the seminary, I had a teacher, my computer science teacher. They didn't even call it then. They called it advanced math. Or when I went to Cooper Union, they called it electrical engineering. But anyway, he basically said back in the day, when him and Turnbull, the English guy, invented the first real computer that broke the Enigma code every day. They had to break that code every freaking day. That wasn't just, we won it, now we know because we did that with the Japanese. But the Enigma code was such an advanced code, it changed every day or 10 times a day. And that's why they had to invent the computer to figure out all the, different patterns it could be. So anyway, I gave the speech that was supposed to be about that, and about the economics of it, the finances, and how it, we had to be one world order, blah, blah, blah. And so, to give that speech, it was the keynote speech of this, big conference at the UN. They're giving it to a guy who's 21 and everybody else is in their 50s, That was supposed to be the feather in my hat that would start my career to be their chosen boy. And so I'm standing up there and I'm looking out at everybody and they're all looking at me and I'm not saying anything. And I look over to my Clarence, he was an amazing guy. And for a black man, he was, way ahead of everybody and everyone knew it. So that's why he was, and this is the UN, so we got to have a few black guys in charge. So anyway, him and George were, said, that's why I was there. Anyway, so I got the speech and it's, I wrote it, gave it to the, guys who checked things off and they made changes and rewrote it. And I was supposed to read that and that was close enough to my thoughts. And that's what I got paid for 30 years, to write things that people would change and say it was theirs. But anyway, I'm standing there and I got these papers in my hand and I look around for a good 30, 40 seconds before, people were kind of getting a little anxious. And so I looked at my speech and I just threw it up in the air. It was about 5 pages. Threw it up in the air and it kind of flittered behind me, and I said, I was told to give this speech, but I'm not going to give that speech. What I'm going to give you is a speech about love. And I went on about, you know, co-creation of love's love. And that whole thing that I talk a lot about, I talked about that because, Billy Kluver talked about that. Madame Olga Kluver talked about that. Grandpa Stahl talked about that. In all their own contexts, meaning Grandpa Stahl talked about that within the dynamic of, Tesla technology and scalar physics. And the reason I got into the theosophical side is because of Madame Ugo Kluwer. I mean, because she was like way above any of those guys, and they revered her like, who knew her, like she was a god, a demigod, because she was like thousands of years old. And Billy was this guy, again, he was kind of like me. He was a grand artist who brought modern art to America. A guy won the Nobel Prize for discovering background radiation, basically took the magnometer, which is this thing that propagates microwaves for radar, and made it, he worked at the Rad Lab, and he worked for Loran, who was this really rich guy who invented modern electronics, especially radar. And radar, not the atomic bomb, radar won us the Second World War. And Billy made all the little gizmos that went along with the great discoveries to make it really work and miniaturize it so it could go on the top of a 70 millimeter anti-aircraft shell, so that shell would go, ooh, and when it got near an airplane, then blow up, not just by luck hit it. Anyway, so those were the guys who were just the top of the rung of the people who were playing with my brain, making me think about stuff. And that's what I talked about for about 40 minutes. And it kind of enamored the 500 people in that auditorium at the United Nations. They were like, and when I kind of went and sat down, all the people after me, they got applause, depending on, who's left or right or whatever political yahoo they were, is how much applause they got. But there was like unbelievable, I sat and everyone's mouth was open. And Clarence got up and said, boy, that Al. Now he's a guy who knows his First Amendment rights, and he is blessed by God to exercise them. We need more guys like that guy who's not scared to not believe in anything, but to have faith in something like love. That I'm remembering exactly what he said. He has faith in love rather than belief in a political or moral or religious structure. He has faith in love's truth, and he lives his life that way. He's 21 years old. I am almost 65, and so basically, I went, then they had a lunch, right? And I sat at a table that I was supposed to have people there that I was going to have no one showed, everyone were like stacking themselves up in other people's tables, and I was sitting alone. And this guy called George Christie came over, and he sat down. He goes, that was pretty amazing, kid. I said, thank you. And who are you? He says, I'm George Christie. And he sat down. He goes, so you know Grandpa Stahl? I go, you know Grandpa Stahl? Grandpa Stahl. I go, you know Grandpa Stahl? He goes, I used to be Nikola Tesla's Padawan. I didn't know what that was until I met Joseph Campbell. And I said, you knew Tesla? So, yeah. And I knew Grandpa Stahl. We were both there in his laboratory manufacturing his equipment. And we were like, he goes, we need to have lunch. And he then said, you kind of finished here. I said, what do you mean? Because after that speech, you kind of gave them your resignment letter. You know, that's why no one clapped. Didn't you notice no one clapped? I said, oh, I noticed that. And he says, and then Clarence, he gave you that little send off. It's like getting the gold watch. He goes, but I think I have stuff for you to do. And George is the guy. He also knew Billy Kluver, and he also was at the Rad Lab. And he was the man who single-handedly started Intelsat, the nonprofit international organization that put satellites and Earth stations to give satellite communications. Because he worked on Keyhole and other, he was one of the, not for, yeah, TRW. He started their labs. They took TRW, which is just a kind of, I don't even know what TRW was before they started making satellites, but they had been around. They had money. And they went over to the Rad Lab and out to Los Alamos and picked up a few of the people they wanted and started doing what they did. And George was their head guy, head engineer, head scientist, head everything. And so George was one of my last real teachers, per se, or mentors, more mentors, because I had a bunch of teachers, all the people I studied at universities with, they were my teachers, and they let me be their student because they liked that relationship, but they weren't my mentors. It was a little outside of their bailiwick, but I was their student. So anyway, there I am at 21, right? And I have pretty much, I'm really not tied down to anything. See, that would always happen to me. I'd, not be tied down to anything, and I'd have, could do anything I wanted to do, And I always had, somebody wanted me to build them a fancy restaurant or discotheque or art gallery or their house or their office or their studio or whatever. And, I get a nice chunk of change for that, enough that if I went someplace where things weren't that expensive, I could live there a year. Meaning I traveled all over Europe, and I would find nice little towns in France and Spain and Germany, out of the hubbub, but where really interesting people were, or really beautiful food, or really beautiful women, or beautiful real estate, and I would stay there, until I got tired and of it and moved on, and that has been my curse and blessing, is that my life has been one of moving on. So here's where we begin our story. So I'm living in Soho, and I pretty much, because the guy who is the Godfather, I mean the real Godfather, like straight out of the movie Godfather, Mike Pinelli, who ran Spring Street and pretty much everything from NYU to Chinatown, east to west, he was in control of. And he was also in control of the linen and booze for more than half of the restaurants in Manhattan and a few in Brooklyn. And also the meat and vegetables and fish. So, going to restaurants. So, I could do anything I wanted, I was like a made man, but without being the made man, One of the reasons why Mike Pinelli liked me, man, he gave me a pager, like in 1968. It's like, the size of a deck of cards. I mean, it was a big thing. It weighed about almost a pound. It was the battery. And, that thing, the only person who ever used a pager was him, and I knew it was him, and I would go straight to him, no matter what I was doing. I'd go see Mike, see what he wanted. And he loved the fact that I was that respectful and I always took care of everything he wanted me to take care of electrically. And I was always honest, and I never did a scam. Half his crew would be doing something sideways. Me, I would just do what he said, right? And a lot of times he'd have me fix things that didn't need to be fixed. He just liked having me there. And he was like my grandpa. He would like giving me money, but he didn't want to just give me money. He wanted me to. So he had this. I think if you go see the story about David Bowie and I, Mike had this Frankenstein monster of it was a parking machine over near NYU. It was the size of a lot, 70 feet wide, about 150, 200 feet deep. And it was an Otis device where you drove your car in, they pushed a button, and it lifted it up to a floor, moved it over, and stuck it in a thing. So instead of being able to park 20 or 30 cars on that lot, he could park about 300 cars because it was about 7 stories. And it was like built in, the 20s. So everything was run by relays and, like Frankenstein. And no one could fix it. But, Grandpa Stahl showed me how it worked and how to fix it and what to look at and what went wrong with it. And after Grandpa that's that. And so I was like his grandson, and I took care of stuff for him, and so and I was on call. I would be right there. When that little thing went off, I would be right there. I have to take my medicine. Okay, there it is, because my veins are popping out. When my veins pop out, I know that I can do this. I can do two things at once. Anyway, so, I always had whatever money I needed. I always had a job. I always had a place to live. I always had freedom to do whatever the heck I wanted. And I always had access to any intellectual thing that scratched my head. So, I was down in Soho, and Soho started to take off. I mean, really take off. It was big art. This is 1971, and it was taken off. So, it might even been 19. I think it might have been 72. 72. Well, between 71 and 72. And so I had gone to Juilliard, and I had met Marion Tulin, who was on the board there, and she also ran the Hofstra Theater Department, and that's why I went to Hofstra for a couple of semesters. She just got me in there to keep me out of the draft, and so and that's a whole nother story. But so I had a really good connection with Lincoln Center, and I worked at the Vivian Beaumont Theater. I was their electrician, and that's where I met Lester Polikoff, who was Joe Melziner's best boy, and I became Lester's best boy. And he was the designer for the Boston Opera and for Lincoln Center and lots of Broadway shows. So I was his best boy. So that's how I got into the theater big time, and how I got to know Herbert Berghoff and Uta Hagen and Julian Beck and Judith Molina and that whole crew, the avant-garde. Anyway, so I was feeling no pain. So I had this girlfriend, Beth B, who was just the most amazing dancer and most hottest woman and gorgeous soul, and we were, people's soulmates, we were more than that. Because when we came together, we made a third entity, right? And we always had each other's backs, and we always had, we had our hard edges, but it never bothered either of us. I mean, I had a lot of my two wives and lots of other girlfriends. My idiosyncrasy, they would make a list. Okay, these are all the good things about Al, and this thing, this, he can't eat anything without dropping half of it on his shirt. And I would do my best not to, have that rough edge get in the way, and they would go, and he's trying so hard, A for effort, so that endears you a lot. It endeared me with Donna Ann McAdams for about 8 years until, for some reason, we had to split. It was her idea. Anyway, and it was a good thing. She went that way, I went this way. I wouldn't be me if I still stayed with her, and she wouldn't be her if she still stayed. We'd be something else. But anyway, Beth and I, so but the most thing was, yeah, the sex was amazing. We both loved to dance. She was a great dancer. She was, I mean, that was her thing, dance. So on Spring Street, there was a place called Robert Wilson Dance Company. He had a loft. And, he was a rich kid, and he ran through all his money. And Robert is the guy who did the two operas that Philip Glass became famous for. One was called Einstein on the Beach, and the other letters from, or postcards from Queen Victoria, something like that. They were both done at Lincoln Center. So, I would, and every Thursday, they would have what was no free night. I mean, everyone could go up to loft, and didn't have to be in the company, and you could dance, right? And that's how Robert found his new finds, right? And so we'd always go up there and swing around, and we'd do that until we were exhausted, and then go home and get even more exhausted. And we lived on Spring Street above a bodega, right? And there were these lofts above it, right? And in the basement was a guy who built and fixed steam boilers, coal and gas and oil fired. And they take a certain level of electrical controls. So I would do his electric. Once he found out I was an electrician, I would do his electric work. And he was in his 40s, and he was a hard drinking, he had been a Marine, da, 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 da. Yet we kind of clicked, and he loved Beth like a daughter. He always wanted to have, daughters. He never got married, so it'd be hard to have daughters. So Beth was his, he would do anything for her. So as the Yuppies moved in, and the buildings went from, guys who had them from the 20s and would sell them to these lawyers and yuppie dudes, they bought them for like $10,000, had them for like 30 years, and rented all the spaces out and probably made $250,000 off the rent over 30 years. And then some guy offers for a building. Or in the beginning, the Yuppies would say 70,000. That would be a lot of money. Sure, okay. I'm going to go to Florida anyway. Anyway, so they, so this guy bought it, and then he started selling the floors out to, and we lived on a floor, and the guy who bought the building, said to me, well, I need this building wired, because it was like wired 1920. You can stay on one of those floors for 2 years. I'll pay for all the materials, and I want you, here's an architectural drawing, to fix your loft into the loft I will live in 2 years. So you'll put in risers and meters and all of that. And anybody wants you, who I sell these lofts to, these floors to, they, you can make money off of them. Anyway, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So, and he was a photographer too, and he knew my work. I mean, he wasn't published or did anything. He was a rich guy, right? His daddy was rich. He was rich. He went to art school, but he didn't, make any art. He just wanted to live amongst artists, right? And he didn't want to work. He bought the building with his daddy's money. He was just gonna, be a landlord. He bought a couple buildings, and he was gonna sell these lofts to his friends for lots of money, and rent the other ones out. And that's what he was gonna live on. Go live in Spain. And I mean, I could relate. I did that, not on my daddy's money, But anyway, so I said, okay. And so the guy in the basement said, why are you doing it? That guy's scum. He's a terrible person. He's evil. I said, well, he's okay. He's just, he lives in Vermont, and he wants to have a house in New York, and daddy's rich. And so I know guys like that. And he's not, per se evil. Oh, you'll rule the day. And I said, it'll be okay. So, Beth wants a nice place. So instead of taking 2 years, well, I'm a quick, bing. I like get the place. I do all the work and I get everything comfortable, general, not like super duper fine finish because I'm not a fine finish guy. But, all the plumbing in, a really nice bathroom, washer and dryer, the kitchen, our bedroom, the loft space that, I sanded the floor and put up sheetrock walls and mirrors so Beth could practice. And anyway, one day this guy shows up, and he knocks on the door. I let him in, and he goes, "Oh, wow! I didn't think you'd get this far." It was like maybe 5 months into the 2 year period, and it's getting to be winter, and so he goes, "Wow, you did a great job. You're gonna enjoy the next 15 months you got." I said, "Oh yeah, we will." Anyway, the next week, like 5 days later, he shows up with a marshal and a locksmith. Kicks us out without, I mean, it's like 8 in the morning, and we're like late sleepers, and and he kicks us out without even letting us take our stuff out. And he has the locksmith change the lock, and we're out there in our pajamas on West Broadway, and Beth's crying, and the guy who does the boiler work in the basement, he says, I told you," and the guy gets in his BMW with a Vermont license plates and drives away. Now he's changed all the locks. He thinks that's all it is, and I'm saying, "What about my stuff?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll throw it out. You just look for it on the street someday. It'll be there." And Beth's in her like pajamas. She got all the clothes. I got, me. I can. It's not a big deal. Anyway, so the guy goes, "You want to get even?" No, I'm not a guy to get even. Because I know people hurt themselves way more. I mean, it's like so. Beth, I'm like going, no, no, no. And Beth goes, "I want to kill that motherfucker. What do you want to do? Let's do it." So I kind of say, well, okay. So we go up there. Now he controls the elevator. Now, even though this moron put a lock on the elevator door, the hinges on the elevator, because of fire code, are on the inside of the elevator, you know, tunnel or whatever you want to call it. And this elevator has no real walls, so he controls the elevator. So we go up to the floor. He knocks the pins out of the hinges, and the door just goes onto the floor. Now, this is a really old building. So back in the day, they used to put shutters, for bad storms, metal shutters. So this guy brings his welder up there, and he welds all the metal shutters of all the windows closed on the inside to the metal frames that are built into the concrete wall. So you're not opening these things without a torch. Then he welds the metal door to the hallway closed. And there's a lock called the Fox lock, which is not just a bolt, but it puts a bar across the door so you can't break the door in. So he welds that closed. Then he takes steel, corner steel, and welds it on the door to the metal frame. So that door is not opening. And again, you're going to have to cut it open with the torch. Well, he then takes 1/4-inch diamond plate steel, which is like, something you make a boiler that cooks at 1200 degrees, that, with a torch, you're not going to really real torch to cut this shit. So he welds that over the door. And then he puts I-beam, like 1-inch metal I-beams going from that steel to the steel plate of the floor. So that door is, and you could, blow it up and it would still not come down. That thing was stronger than a safe. And we take all our stuff and put in the elevator, and he takes us down. Then he puts us in his truck, and he takes us around a corner to Zelf. And Zelf was a trip. Zelf was a guy who had a shop that you could rent any machine, a lathe or he had like the best of best equipment. If you wanted to make like, so for Mike owned peep shows, right? And that's one girl dances and there's like five windows and there are these curtains that come down over a window and then you have to put a coin in there. And he gave me this one apparatus and he goes, can you manufacture those? And I said, yeah, I took it apart, saw how it worked. And I said, yeah, I think I can make that. So he goes, if you need any kind of machine work, go to Zelp. So he introduced me to Zelp. Zelp was a guy who was 70 years old and he had hair as fine as this, that he used to take vitamin A so his hair would be carrot red. And he had a girlfriend, like Sweet Pea, I forgot her name, but it was very pejorative. And she was 72, and all they did was have sex in his office 24/7. They were like bunnies, two old people getting it on, and was like, anyway, he used to manufacture stuff, but he was so into his girlfriend, who was like his secretary, that he rented all that equipment out. So I would go into that shop, and it had a lathe. There's a machine that's named after a city in Connecticut that isn't just a lathe that goes this way, but it has multiple directions. So you can like cut gears and really do, almost computer aided cutting that they have machines. But this machine could make anything. And so I went to Zelf and I started manufacturing these little boxes for Mike Finelli's peep shows. And, I built a lot of his titty bars and, you know, good times. So what I loved about titty bars is that women who were dancers and ran those bars were way stronger than the men. They were taking advantage of the men. It wasn't like, pejorative. Yes, there were a lot of women who were in a situation but Mike's clubs and bars were never that, There were some really slimy guys that, yes, there was that, and they gave them drugs, but these girls weren't that. These girls were in it for the business, and they loved, wrapping men around their finger. They weren't, out, There's a story I have at xrated.blogspot.com, XRATTED, and it's about a titty dancer named Katz. And go read that story. That's the kind of girls that were there. Anyway, so the guy, the welding guy, took us over to Zelf. And Zelf not only had machines to rent, but guys who would be working on things and they didn't want to leave they wanted to work until they got it done. Well, they had like, I wouldn't even call them apartments, but they were like a nice little room with a bed and, a bathroom off to the side and a hot plate and a fridge and a TV and a desk and chairs. And so that was close to what would be known as an SRO, single room occupancy, or a flop house. But it was for these guys who were not bums, but were hardworking people. And, I had slept there more than once when I didn't have a place to sleep. And this was one of those times I didn't have a place to sleep. So went there and, so Beth and I, we got our stuff, place is like full of our stuff. I took her over to another loft I had and said, okay, Beth, this can be yours. And she goes, really? I said, yep. And so we, it was more ours than yours, but I said, this could be yours. And it was one of Benny's loft, and Benny loved her too. Benny was the black super of Worcester Street, who ran 10 buildings for Sylvan Lawrence, but actually was running gambling, opium den, marijuana sales, and gambling in the 10 basements that were all connected by tunnels. It was back from the speakeasy days. And they were basically, it was like an old speakeasy back from the days. Anyway, so, and this was Soho. This was Soho in the beginning. And then it slowly changed as the desperate lawyers and yuppies moved in, and the artists were run out. And there was Spring Natural and food run by the girls, and the Ear Inn, which I told you guys the story. You go back a few, you'll get the story of the Ear Inn. And anyway, so, we have a place to stay and we got a place that we can, fix up. But it was a pretty dingy. It wasn't as nice as my seventh story Worcester 7,000 square foot loft, which I sliced up into lofts and sold to yuppies. I should have kept one of them, but I took the money and ran. Anyway, and Beth was such a great friend because we'd known each other for years, and I would go away to do something for 6 months, a year, and then come back. And if she had a boyfriend, well, that was great. And if not, we'd pick it back up. And anyway, so if you go back to the when I was showing you pictures of one of my photo books of those days at the library when the old guy broke in and we talked. I switched from telling stories of the old days to talking to him about his old days. Well, there's a picture of Beth there. She's in like not net stockings, but she's in like one gigantic net. Anyway, so we're at Zelf's, and it's a Thursday night, and to pick our spirits up, we decided to go dancing with Robert. And so we go and we dance, and Robert says he's got this vision to put on shows, but he's running out of money and vision. He had no clue about what to, because he wanted to do opera, but he had no libretto, right? So I said, okay. So, but he said, so we're going to go on tour, and going on to, take the dance company. And so there was, about 15, Beth was one of the primary dancers, on open dance night, there'd be 40 people there. So he's given a spiel about this to, after, the dance, about 1 o'clock in the morning when the music stopped and everyone's slowly going home, and he's, the 14 or 15 who are the company, and a few other people. He's telling the story about, so I'm going to hit the road, and anyone who wants to come along, you're duly invited. That'd be great. I'd love it, and I got this bus, and I got it from my friend Lester, who had the Gray Rabbit, and it was an old, Cleveland transit bus, and fixed up like with all the seats except a few in the front and back taken out, and big piece of plywood where everyone could sleep, and storage space underneath. Anyway, so we hit the road, and we're driving from college, and that's where I got the idea of the Traveling Video Art Circus, because we would go to different colleges. Because he was a, scholastic artist, dancer, kind of, college. Not the, he wasn't connected to the bohemian crowd or the avant-garde crowd. He wished he was. One of the reasons he liked me, other than me being a photographer, a lighting designer, an electrician, and a good carpenter and plumber, he liked all the people I knew. And the fact that I kept having my Friday night salon. Anyway, so Beth and I get on the bus because it's winter, and that both the places we have no heat whatsoever. So we decided, well, this will be, we'll do this until the spring comes. So we get on the bus, and we're traveling all, bouncing from college to college, and Robert's getting, a chunk of change out of their student activity funds. And because, that's why I realized that, these colleges were happy to give Robert the money, because it was something they could give, oh, that's artistic, that's good for the kids. And because they had to spend that money every semester, they couldn't kick it over to the next semester. They couldn't have a slush fund. Even though Virginia Tech did that up to $1 billion. But anyway, that's another story. So we get out to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we've been at it now for about 6 weeks. And it's getting a little thin. And so we're there and we're dancing for, in Santa Fe, I call the city of, walls, because all these rich people have like their Mexican hacienda, big, you know, clay, mud walls around them, their own little gated community. And then the hacienda is the right Spanish word. So anyway, we're at this one witch guy's, and we're dancing for his friends. And we're like basically dancing for our meal, a place to stay. So we do our little performance, and we're having a nice big meal. And this guy and everybody there is like grooving to the, and Robert is pretending he's a bohemian and he's an anarchist and he's, all power to the people, blah, blah, blah. And it's about 72, and the whole thing with Watergate is coming out, and everyone hates Nixon. Very similar to what's going on right now. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. And so, because Nixon with the silent majority and all of that, he had his. I mean, he had the Republican Party wrapped around his finger, and they had the Congress, and because everyone was sick of the Democrats and the Vietnam War, and Nixon said he would end the war. And anyway, so Robert's going on like that, and we're having a dinner, and we're all eating rice and beans and being such good people, good liberals. And you know what liberals are? People who feel guilty. Again, everything I say is a stream of consciousness. This isn't like don't believe anything I say. Go check up, Google all these stories, all these people, you know. You will see that they're all there, and if they show any photos, usually I'm like, over in the corner somewhere. So we're at this place, and Robert gets a phone call, and and he goes off this phone call, and he comes, "I've got great news." And we're all going to Iran. We're all going to the capital, Tehran, the Shah of Iran. I was just speaking to his lawyer, and they have this festival of culture because Tehran is probably the most cultured place on this planet. That was the center of the Persian Empire. I mean, they and the Greeks had it down, and along with the people down in, the Incas and Aztecs, they also had it down, and a few other people. There was a city where St. Louis is now of indigenous North Americans that had 1 million people there, that had sewers and water, and was a city way more sophisticated in art, technology, science, math than Rome was at the same time. So he says, we're going to go to Tehran and dance for the Shah for this festival. And he's going to give me a check for $2 million. I'll be able to do my operas. Because he was like running out of his own little money that his rich family had given him. And so, I mean, if he had been a good businessman, invested it, he could have made something with it, but he just spent it, which is okay. I've been there, done that. But he was bred to do the other. Me, I was bred to be a scholar. So and we're supposed to be a collective. And I go, wait a minute. Don't we all have to agree on this? And he goes, everybody who wants to be rich and famous, get on the bus. We're going to leave in about 3 hours. Get your stuff together, put it on the bus, we're going. And I said, no. We have to vote on this. He goes, everyone's going to vote with their feet. I said, well, I'm not going. And Robert, at that point, just, walked, he was already gone. He was thinking of the $2 million. And pretty much everyone, except a few people who really thought we were a collective, really thought we were, Anyway, they all wanted to be rich and famous. Robert said, if you want to be rich and famous, get on that bus. So everyone got on the bus, even Beth. I was left in this rich guy's house all by myself. And the bus pulls out of this guy's hacienda around 10 p.m. And I'm like sitting, on a piece of outside furniture, watching them go, like, I'm going to be a man of my integrity, You guys can all sell yourselves. And I looked at Beth, and she looked at me like, and she goes, why don't you come along? It'll be, I said, no, no, no. Beth, you go, you know, it's fine. You know, I love you. I'll always love you. We'll always be friends. This ain't between you and me. This is between everybody else on there. It's okay, buddy. You go. And actually, after a couple of days, I'll be fine with everybody else. You know me. I don't hold any grudges. I don't blame anybody. This is my path. For some reason, I'm gonna be in New Mexico, and you're gonna go to Tehran in Iraq. And she kissed me and said, "Boy, okay, see you later." Say, it always, come on, I'll see you in 6 months or what. I'll be back in New York, not a problem. So she goes, okay. So the bus drives away, and the rich guy goes, "You got to get out." By the time the bus leaves, by the time he says you got to get out, it's like pushing 11 p.m. It's dark 30, and this is Santa Fe. There's no light anywhere. It's just the stars. Looks like, you know, Vincent Van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night. And so I go, what are you talking about? I'm going to sleep back. No, you're not. Get out. You're a bum. Get out. I said, what happened to, power to the people? And fuck you. Get out. I said, I don't have a nickel in my pocket. He goes, yeah, you're a bum. Get out. And I had nothing. It went out with a bus. I forgot to take it off. So I had like a pair of sneakers, a pair of jeans, and a shirt. That was it. And my wallet. That was it. Yeah. And my keys. I had 3 keys in my pocket to my places back in New York City. So, he get out. He opens the gate, get out. So I get out and I walk down the dirt road towards Interstate 25, about 5 miles from his house. I mean, this place was kind of high on the hill. You could see 25 over there. As I walked, it took me about, I don't know, half an hour to walk the 5 miles downhill to I-25. And now it's like getting close to midnight by the time I get to the interstate. And, for the last 15 minutes, I've been able to see the road. And there's been no cars, nothing, no traffic, no headlights, no nothing, nobody going north-south or south-north, nothing. And I get up to the entrance ramp of the highway, and it says a sign there, if you're going to go to jail for 3 months if you hitchhike, drive a bicycle, or a moped on this interstate. And I'm going, well, what am I going to do? It's probably safer if I try to go down there and hitchhike now than if I wait till sunrise and do it and then get arrested. So I'm just going to go down there. And if I see what seems like a cop car, I'll just, so I went down to where there was a gully next to the road so I could kind of duck down there if I had to. Anyway, so I'm standing there by the side of the highway. And as soon as I get down off the ramp, to the highway itself, I see headlights coming towards me, and they're coming at me pretty fast. And I go, oh, okay, that looks kind of, at least it's headlights, it's a vehicle, it's moving fast. Okay, I'll make sure it's not a cop car. And I'm looking. And there's no moon, it's just starlight. It's pretty amazing. And 100 yards up, I see what it is. And, if it had been a cop car, they would have seen me way before I seen them. But it wasn't. It was a screaming pink Mustang. And it was hauling ass. And I had my little thumb out there, and this thing just shot by me like a rocket. And I turn around and I look at it, and it gets, 100 yards down, and it puts on the brake lights, and then he puts in reverse, comes back. And he opens the door, and he's got the Moody Blues on the 8-track, right? And it's this guy older than me. He's got white hair. He looks like Santa, right? And so he says, "Where you going?" And I go, "I have no idea." He says, "Good, get in." So I jump in, and he takes off, and he goes, I said, "Where are you from?" He goes, "Well, I'm coming from Chicago." I said, "You've been driving all the way from Chicago?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah. I grew up in New Mexico, but, and he starts to tell me this story, that he is Spanish, Mexican, and, oh, he was, there's Hopi and Navajo. He was Navajo or Hopi, I'm not quite sure, but he was either one. He was a code talker. And so he had, his father was quite sophisticated and well educated, was a medical doctor, and his mother was the Indian, and she also was quite educated, and she would have been a doctor, but she was Indian and a woman, and she was being educated in, the early 20th century, so it didn't go that far. So anyway, they got together, and she had a family in Albuquerque, and he started a hospital there for her people, and so they had a nice place, and they bought some nice homes, and they were traditional homes with the Vegas and made out of adobe and all of that, and a real hacienda, round shaped with a center courtyard. Anyway, and they had a little supermarket and a little hospital, and they took care of the Hispanic, Chicano, and Indian folk of North Albuquerque. So he went away to school, and then the war came, and he came back to be with his father, who got sick, and they were building up the Air Force Base there. That's where Nellis and what's it? It starts with a K. Kirkland Air Force Base, and so he kind of got. First, he worked at the Air Force Base, and then they found out this guy's really smart. So he was sent over to the communications because he knew a bunch of languages. And he hadn't been quite, drafted yet because he was still taking care of his father and his mother, and he was doing this, America hadn't quite got into the war yet, but it would look, they were tooling up. That's why they were building the space there. And so an officer said, "You're a smart guy. You actually have college education. You don't look Indian. And I'm in intelligence, even though I'm here running a communication school. I'm really, from the newly commissioned Pentagon, and I'm part of this thing called the OSS, and, I'm about communications, but intelligence, And I think you would be really good as a code breaker." And so the Army, because it was the Army Air Corps, they have, if you go back to DC, I'm going to send you, if you want to, you can join the military, and I will have you commissioned as an officer so no one gives you any crap. And I will send you to this special school, and I think you would do really well there. And so his name was Romero, Christopher Romero, Dr. Christopher Romero. So again, he was a guy. So he goes, "Are you a handy guy?" I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Boy, am I handy. I'm really handy." He goes, "Well, that's good because my mother died, and I'm going down to take care of her estate. And there are about 5 houses, a small store, and a hospital, and they're all kind of falling down. And I'd like to fix them up and kind of do it my Parents did, maybe not as well or as big, but try to help my people, my old neighborhood, because it's still the same people, the same way it was back when I was a boy in the 20s. And I said, okay, sounds like a plan. So I went back and I fixed everything up, and I did such, nothing was wired. I wired everything. I plumbed everything. I fixed everything. And as I was doing it, he said, I got no real money to pay you, but you can have, if you do all this work, you can have one of these, homes for the rest of your life if you want, or at least the rest of my life, however long that's going to last. But I like you. You're more than entertaining. You're a good friend, and I love the way you're the best student I've ever had. I've been in colleges as a professor for the last 30 years, and you're the most interesting student I've ever had. So I think this is it's like, out of Casablanca where Louis and Rick are going, this is a friendship that's going to last. Anyway, as they walk into the fog. So that was Dr. Romero. So I do all of that, fix everything up, and it's right in the middle of the heaviest Chicano neighborhood there is, man. Just woo, OGs everywhere. And everyone's selling pot and heroin and meth. And but it was still very family oriented. This is really when I realized how great Mexican people are as a family people. And anyone who gets into drugs, they stop being human beings, And that's the problem with drugs, because people do drugs because there's a hole in their heart. Nobody in their right mind would ever friggin' do drugs. And marijuana isn't, it's a medicine rather than a drug. It's a medicine. And you can overdo medicine, I mean, I don't mind a little smoke now and then. It's really good for my pain. It's really good for my eyes. It's really good for my blood. But, the last time I had anything was, 5 months ago. I don't need it. I don't go looking for it. If, someone who knows I like it comes by and visits and we smoke a bowl or a joint, that's fine. But I don't, And that's drugs, And to say that marijuana's a gateway drug, if you legalized it, it wouldn't be a gateway drug. Milk is a gateway drug. Every drug addict ever there was drank milk at some time in their life. It's the same kind of logic. Come on, that's stupid, right? But I don't I don't even smoke marijuana. I would, if someone offers me some, sure, not a problem. But otherwise, no, because, A, I have no money. B, it's kind of a waste of time, except for the few times that someone turns me on, and that's fine. I mean, if I really wanted to do I'd go to Colorado or California or someplace like that, but I don't. So anyway, we're in the middle of that neighborhood, and I'm, it takes me, 3 or 4 months to fix everything up to where he rents things out. And he rents these houses out to folks who have families. And he says, well, I'd like, $200 for each, per house, but I'll take whatever you got that month. And he had a store, and, it's like a little bodega kind of store, canned food and a few of this and that and vegetables. And again, he would give people, you can pay me tomorrow. He was a great guy. And at night, we sat around, and so all of the OGs would pay Dr. Romero, because Dr. Romero liked marijuana. He would, they'd leave him a bale or two, So, we'd be smoking away, and he taught me how to play Go and cribbage and gin and other games of that nature. And card games, I was never that big of a fan of. Cribbage is a card game, so it was like, But I loved Go and chess, so we'd play that mostly. And he had a really good library. He had it shipped down from Chicago, so I was reading his books, and we'd be talking philosophy and theology and physics and you name it, history. He was my first really great history teacher. I mean, he knew Howard Zinn. He knew all the really good historians, you know, and he knew Gord Vidal. So back in, that's how I kind of, and he knew Joseph Campbell, and he knew all these guys. And so, when I would go look these people up and want to, study with them or at least talk to them, I would mention his name, and they, oh, Chris, oh yeah, well then you must be okay. Anyway, so I'm there living with him, and and I'm just smoking pot, and that's why I don't smoke pot because all I was doing was smoking pot and eating boxes of potato chips out of his store. Anyway, after about a month of that, and I wasn't shaving and I wasn't bathing and I was wearing the same pajamas day in and day out, and he basically said, you need to get a job. And I said, what? He said, yeah, I mean, not because, you're going to pay me rent. No, you got that house forever. But no, you're not doing anything. Yeah, you play Go with me. Yeah, you're reading books in my library. But no, you're not producing. If you were writing a novel or if you were, doing some great research, yeah, okay. But you're not. You're just, turning it into, look, you got things going out of your ears. You're turning into a potato. So I kind of agreed with him because it was kind of making me I mean, it's beautiful every day, and I was always meeting interesting people. I was, a few girlfriends here and there. Life was, people would think that was great. I mean, I had always had whatever money I really needed because I would fix somebody's this or that, but I really didn't have a job. So the first job, I looked in the newspaper, looked around, and in Albuquerque, they had no mass transit. If you didn't have a car, you had to walk or ride a bike. And it was spread out all over the place. So I saw this one job that said, don't have a car? We'll come and get you. We'll give you breakfast and lunch and pay you really well. And they didn't say anything else about what the job was. And I think it also said you had to be white. I said, well, I fit that category. And I said, I'll just call them up and check it out. So they said, oh, yeah, sure. We'll come and get you tomorrow. Do you have any nice clothes? And I said, I think I can scrounge something nice. And, because Dr. Romero was almost my size. He was he wasn't fat. He was in pretty good shape. But I was a little bit taller and I was, 21. So I was probably in my best shape, I was, it was about 170. So, I put on a nice pair of his pants, a nice shirt, and a jacket, and 7 in the morning, the van showed up. I went out there. The guy said, "You're Al?" I said, "Yep." I said, "What was the guy's name?" Oh, he had a very weird name. Oh, it'll come to me. Hal or Heel or Hall, or it started with an H. And I get in there and we go to McDonald's and we have our Egg McMuffin and a cup of coffee. And I said, so what's the job? And he goes, you're going to be a Kirby vacuum cleaner demonstrator. I said, huh? And he goes, you will demonstrate the vacuum. And you will get this he shows me this yellow card. And you will get the client to sign the yellow card, which will give our salespeople the legal right to go into their house and negotiate a deal for the purchase of the vacuum. And I go, well, that sounds strange, but what do I get paid? And he said, for every demonstration, you don't have to make the sale, just the demonstration, and if you get them to sign the yellow card, you get $5 a card. I said, oh. I said, how many demonstrations can you do? He goes, as many as we drop you off with this little suitcase over here. And, he put the suitcase up on the thing and he opened it up And inside was like a demonstration manual. And it says, read this. Can you read? I said, yeah. So I'm looking at it. And he explains how a Kirby vacuum cleaner works and all the different parts and the attachments and everything about it. And he kind of goes through, a sales, a demonstration pitch, how to do it, what to say, how to get in the door. And, I'm a pretty quick read. So while he's explaining it, I'm kind of zipping through it. And I go, okay. And he goes, okay, so I'm going to ride you to a neighborhood and I'm going to let you off and you just go down, from house to house to house to house, knock on the door, do what the book says, do as I showed you how to get your foot in the door, give a demonstration, and you say, hi there, how you doing? Can I just show you the Kirby F14 master vacuum cleaner. Just want to show it to you. Don't need to buy it. Just let me show it to you. And legally, for me to come in and show it to you, you need to sign this yellow card giving me permission. And with them signing it, it gives them legal right, the vacuum cleaner salesman, to walk into their house and give them the pitch. Right? So I get $5 for every one I see. So, I go there and I go from house to house to house to house to house to house to house. Before lunchtime, I've gone through 20 houses. And I got every one to sign. That's, $5 times 20, do the math. So that's, I meet the guy. He says, just stay on the street and at around 12, find yourself a tree and sit under it and I'll come and get you. I'll see you. You'll be somewhere in a 2 to 3 block range of this one street and, just stay on the street and I'll come get me. We'll go have lunch. So I do that, right? And I give him the 20 cards and he goes, that's very good. And he buys me my Big Mac and fries and a Coke and he pulls out his wallet and he gives me $100, 5 20s. And it's like, whoa. Right then and there, right? $100. It's like more money than I've had in a month. And he goes, let's see how good you can do this afternoon. I'm going to drive you back and you take it from there. So anyway, I, go and do another 20 houses by the time, 4 o'clock rolls around. And, he takes me out to dinner to the Coach restaurant where I have a big slab of roast beef and a baked potato and some asparagus and we split a bottle of wine. And he goes, you are a natural at this. And he peels, opens his wallet and peels off another $100. So that's $200 I made in one friggin' day. I mean, I'd be happy to do that today. Anyway, so he goes, I see a really good, potential for you. You're going to have a great career at Kirby. And he goes, if you sell a vacuum cleaner, every sale of a vacuum cleaner, you get $300 per salesman. Today, man, you could do that every day of the week. $1,000 a week. Who in this town makes that kind of money? Nobody. But you can. So I'm going, because I was never shy of making money, and it seemed totally legal, not a big deal. So anyway, after the first week, I do make $1,000. 5 days, I get $200 a day. I make $1,000. And at Friday, at every day, they have a party. And the person who is the most successful gets a star on this calendar. And salesmen had gold stars, and demonstrators had green stars. And whoever had the most stars at the end of the month got an extra $1,000. You know, so it's pretty good to me. So I start doing this, and I'm doing pretty good. So the first week I get a green star. Next week get a green star. Next week get a green star, and I'm making $1,000 give or take. And I get cash, because I'm considered a contractor, not an employee. There's no insurance, no nothing, no retirement, no 401k, no Social Security, just cash, and they cut you 1099 at the end of the year. So I'm working away, and I'm doing really good until a couple weeks go by, and I'm still in the same, and I'm in the neighborhood that this guy keeps dropping me off is like the poor neighborhood. People on welfare or disability or very limited resources. And these Kirby vacuum cleaners cost $1,200 a pop, right? And this company is selling like 20 a week to people, well, mostly that I can see, are people who shouldn't have a. I mean, Kirby is a great vacuum cleaner, but not $1,200. Come on. And their scam is, so you don't have to pay the money. You only have to, put $10 down, and 2 months you don't have to pay anything. And then from each month that you have to pay $20. And usually by the third month, they can't pay that first $20. They can put the $10 down, and that's great. And they're, going nuts with their Kirby. Because this thing could do anything, fly a jet plane. That you could Kirby. That was a pretty amazing machine. Anyway, and they kept selling the same 20 Kirbys over and over again. And when they signed the contract, if they couldn't keep up the payments, they took the vacuum cleaners away, and then they garnished, their welfare check, or took their property away from them. Anyway, within 3 or 4 weeks, no more than a month, I kind of realized what was going on. And it was like, now this is criminal. This is terrible. So I kind of went to the Better Business office in downtown, and went in there and said, the Kirby guys, you're doing a scam. The guy who ran the Better Business office and was the not he wasn't the district attorney, but he was the head guy from the Attorney General's office from the state, and that was Hal's brother, Marvin. And he looked at me and said, son, you should not have come here. And anyway, I went back, and Hal was really I never saw a human being as pissed off as him. And he goes, he just went, I thought he was going to kill me, right? So I was supposed to get the $1,000 because, I had every week a green star on there. I was the boy. And he said, you're not getting the $1,000. I said, what are you talking about? I sold, he goes, and not only that, you're going to get half of what you earned, meaning for the next month. So what? And you can't just quit. You've got $5,000 in your pocket. Nah, my brother represents the Attorney General. You work for me. You are my slave. And instead of getting $5 a demonstration, you're getting $250. And it was like, this is the first time that I had ever been in a position where I wasn't the dude, that I wasn't, where I wasn't in control. No one's in control. I mean, in New York, all the things I did, I wasn't the boss. I didn't own anything, but those people needed me more than I needed them. So I was given utmost respect, and and this was not respect. He said, "I am your slave." I was his slave, and any further getting out of line, and I would physically regret it. And I was like, that old man you live with, he may not be in the best of health, stuff like that. And so I was really thrown into a funk. And so I no longer dressed up. When I was in the prep school, when they tried to punish me, I did things like I wore the same clothes for 4 months straight, never washed them, covered in ketchup and mustard. And, you know, so I would say, okay, I will be as most unappetizing, unpleasant a demonstrator as I can. And I would get no, not in the door, and they'll just let me go. And then that'll be that. So that's what I do. The first week, I don't have a single freaking yellow card. And next week, it's like I smell now. It's like I get in his van. And it's like, oh, what is that smell? Oh, that's me. I shat in my pants last night. Anyway, so it was getting to extremes, and so he drives me to another neighborhood, not the poor, but the uber rich. And I'm like, that's very strange. Okay, fine. Okay. He goes, so, go on. See you at the end of the thing at the, at noon. Just sit under a tree up there and I'll come and get you. Okay. So I'm walking down and I'm going, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And I'm looking at, I don't just start at the bottom of the cul-de-sac and work back. I'm like going, where am I? I don't know what to do. Do I just go up by the tree and sit there until he comes to get me? And it was like now getting towards latter, it was starting to get hot in the, from not in the morning. And these trees were not like real shade trees. So looking around where to go. And it was like some magnet drew me to this house. So I walk up to the house, ding dong, right? And this goddess of a sexual being answers it. And she is wearing a see-through negligee, nothing else, and these little slippers, and her body form is something that God has made. I mean, God has made us all, but I mean, just like breasts, like everything about her was like, I have a libido, but it's not in the front of what I do. But boy, my libido took over. And she looks at me and she goes, would you like to come in for a drink? Now it's like 9 in the morning and I'm going in. I thought maybe coffee or something like that. And she comes in and sits me down, and it looks like George Jetson's house. I mean, uber modern, and and I sit down in this leather chair that's just unbelievably comfy, and she comes out with a martini shaker and two martini glasses. She gives me a martini, and I knock it back, and I don't know what she had in there, but it was like rocket fuel to my libido, right? And then she goes, those clothes are awful soiled. I think you should really clean them. Don't, I mean, when's the last time you put that in the laundry? And I said, I can't remember. So she was, she walks me into this master bedroom with a beautiful, unbelievable bathroom, my little mud hut has a toilet and a kind of shower with a hose, and the sinks in the kitchen. And this thing is like, whoa, and there's this shower thing that has, 8,000 jets. And steam room, and it was just pretty friggin' amazing. And she starts to take my clothes off. And, I've had enough martini where I'm just like kind of lubricated. And I am definitely, my mast is flying high. And it was like a porno movie, you know, because she takes all my clothes off and goes straight to business and starts using my tool to pleasure her as much as she can. And then she just lets her diaphanous little garment fall to the ground. She turns on the shower and we get in there and she scrubs every little inch of me and has me scrub every little inch of her. And we're off to the races. We're rolling around that house, leaving our scent on every piece of furniture, all over the place. And the whole time she's just hitting the bar, just opening up bottles and knocking it back. And I don't know where this libation came from, but it wasn't because you didn't get drunk. It was like psychotropic. It was like, and I'm pushing 22, and I've been in the rock and roll field and I've had some pretty amazing girlfriends, but I never had anything like this. This is like very Greek. It's like those paintings you see on the walls. Anyway, so this is going on, and I lose total, connection to time. I have no idea what friggin' time it is. And then all of a sudden, she has this little mask. She goes, "My father likes this when we do this." And she puts a little mask over my face, hits this little button, and it's amyl nitrate. And you get the total, you have to snap it in front of your nose. It's like you can't miss it. It's like you open your mouth, you breathe it up through your nose, whatever. It's like in your freaking brain. And it's like, wow, I am like now out in space and being used in ways that I didn't even imagine. And so this is like going again. I have no idea. I got there at 9:30 in the morning. God knows what time. I have lost all sense and all care of what time it is or that I have to meet, Hal. And this guy always wore shit brown polyester leisure suits, right? And I couldn't care less. I had already, if I get fired for this, well, good. What's he gonna do? Kill me and put me out in the desert? Well, he probably would. Anyway, but I wasn't even thinking about any of that. I was just thinking about, and this girl's name was Sophia. And, I did, she, looked my age. She didn't look like a teenage girl. She definitely looked older than 18 or 19. And I asked her how old she was during some moment of we're resting, smoking a cigarette. And she said that she was 8 weeks old. And I was like, and I didn't take it any further than that. 8 weeks old? Okay. Anyway, so we went back to business and we're having a great old time. And I was really, she kept, putting that little mask over my face and kept, plying the martini shaker to me. And I had never, I worked in rock and roll. I worked in the Fillmore East for 4 years. And, I had tasted a little bit of this and that, but I was, like I said, didn't like drugs, didn't like any of that. I'd already learned how to meditate and, had already, been, when Jimi Hendrix says, "Are you experienced?" I was given that kind of experience by Madame Ugo Kluwer and a few other friends. But I was getting experienced in ways that day that I had never been experienced. Anyway, so we are on the floor and we are spent. We are like, at least I'm spent. I'm like seeing double. I can't focus, but I still haven't lost my flagpole. It is, just still. And she's sitting on it, kind of bouncing around a little. Like I said, this is a porno movie from another planet. And so all of a sudden, these not black hands, but these white hands, surrounded by black, grab me by my long hair and pull me up and drag me away. And the girl is still attached, and she kind of rolls off me and she goes, Daddy, Daddy, what's wrong? And that's when I go, uh-oh. And all of a sudden, I am thrown into a swimming pool, right? Which, like, really, bing, I am back on Earth, right? And I hear this other splash next to me. And then I am pulled out of the pool by my hair like a chicken. And who is holding me by the hair? But Hal in the shit brown polyester suit. And if I thought he was mad before, this guy he had flames coming out of his nose and ears, and he was redder than Hades. And oh boy, and he had a gun. And he had it to my head. And I am like, and then I hear this German voice, Hal, stop that. And Hal is about to pistol whip me with that gun, and he says, break 49784, mandatory command, freeze. And Hal is just frozen. And he's holding me by the hair. And he goes, let go of the young man. And I fall back into the pool. And I kind of swim out in the middle of the pool so no one can grab me and maybe they can shoot me. But, I'm a little safer out there. And then he turns to the young and she gets out very dutifully, and she's standing there dripping wet, naked, standing, at attention to her. And she goes, Daddy, is it all right? And he goes, yes, dear, it is fine. You go into the room and you put on that nice purple dress that I'd like to see you in. And she goes, yes, Daddy. She skips, her little butt is skipping away out of sight. And the guys there are, Hal is like there with the gun like this, about to pistol whip me, but he's no longer holding on to me. And there are other two guys there, and they're looking to this old gentleman, white hair, white everything, whiter than white, wearing a very nice gray kind of very well-tailored suit. I'm looking at his Italian shoes. Because my dad is a total dresser, so I'm kind of familiar to dress. Anyway, so he goes, gentlemen, go into the living room and wait. And take Hal with you. So they and he goes, they look just like the men in the movie of Men in Black. So I'm swimming in the middle of the pool, and he goes, young man, come here. Swim towards me, I won't hurt you. So he walks over to this little bin where there are nice terry cloth towels and very nice terry cloth robes and little slippers. He goes, dry off. He hands me a towel. Put this robe on and put these slippers on and come over and sit by me. And we sit down in these kind of very cushy pool chairs, and not recliners, but chairs. So I'm kind of sitting straight up, and we're like sitting face to face. And he takes out of his jacket, I swear to you, the same kind of little device that's in the Men in Black. It looks like a pen. It's got the red top like a flashlight. And he goes, look at this. He hits his little button, and it's flash in my eyes. And I am off in a white haze. And he goes, I want you to count from three to one backwards. Three. And I go, three. And he goes, and you're going into a deep, deep state of relaxation. Three. And he starts picking it up, counting to one. And he takes me all the way back to the beginning of time when things were dark and then light came, and he showed me the whole existence of time and basically showed that it was an artifice, basically a electronic, but he didn't call it electronic, he called it artificial intelligence. And he called it the Matrix. And he said, you're just a piece of code. You're an exquisite piece of code. And where I got the nomenclature of ugly, he goes, you're more than your ugly bag of water. And he goes on. Anyway, so he basically gives me a very biblical, he takes the Torah and, the New Testament and Buddha, Hindu, Islam apart. And it's like we've suspended time. It's like we were there for days and we were going through all of this together. And his name was Dr. Marvin Bittenoff. And he was the first real Nazi I ever met. And he was on the same level as the Doctore in Brazil or any of the Nazis I met in Australia. Or, and then from him I met more Nazis. But anyway, so we're sitting and we're talking like forever about everything. And if you want to know more about that, go to my xratted.blogspot.com, and I have a whole little story about this. Anyway, we walk back into the living room, and Hal jumps up and he goes to, throttle me, and Bittenoff says, Hal, stop, code. And he gives a number and says, and he gives him a kind of digital order, and Hal kind of blinks out, and then he goes, you will not remember any of this, you will not remember this boy, and your prime directive is to protect him, not to harm him. You will die first before he is harmed. Do you understand? And Hal goes, yes, I understand, doctor. And he says, okay, boys, take Hal home. So he takes him home. And basically, we sit in the living room, and he mixes me another amazing cocktail. And Sophia walks out in like this amazing 1940s satin dress. Not satin. It's more that really soft. Anyway, so she comes over and sits on his lap and starts twiddling his hair. And so she goes, do you really like Al? Al is really great. I mean, I've never felt anything like this for anyone, even though I love you, Daddy, but you're my daddy. And she's like, being very sexual with him. And it's obvious that this is more than his daughter, And so he, again, gives her a digital command and says, okay, you are no longer going to be this, Sophia. You're going to be this. And you're more my daughter. You're not sexually attracted to me. You're not, you love me for the parental character that I am. And she goes, yes, doctor, I understand. I will call you father. Thank you, Sophia. Code ended. She goes, right. Okay, Father, I'm going in and making dinner just like you like. She's going to make cabbage and potatoes. And he then tells me that he has been working on artificial intelligence since 1912. And that alien races had come to Earth and had been on Earth from the very beginning. And they had picked a number of people, and Tesla is one of them, Steinmetz, and a number of other people all around the world to work on different projects because humanity was just a code, and it had some bad code, and it kept going to the same glitch, and it was going to be destined to replay the same, rising to a certain level and then crashing in horrific war, rising, destroying, sometimes destroying the whole planet or solar system. And if it took a billion years to get back to that, but the what was to be done was to get humanity to that place where they would ascend out of this bad code, because the only way they could get out of the prison planet they were in was to ascend out of it, not to evolve, not to, make a bigger empire, make more money, fancier car, more girls, more sex, more drugs, more rock and roll. None of the above. You had to ascend, and the only way you could ascend was you had to do physical, you had to create, but you had to co-create with love, because that was the prime directive, the prime code of this CPU of the collective mind of humanity. And humanity stepped away from that co creation in the ego of free will, because a number of these alien races were trying to break their own chains, and they had picked, genetically engineered humans. Not, they were first given the right to genetically engineer humans as a slave creature, but they weren't supposed to have a soul or an intellect, and a self-aware conscious, because that was dangerous. But they did, because they wanted to develop it in us in a way that no other creature in all the creation had, so they could, and they were like the fallen angels, right? So this is where all of the, rabbinical and theologic stuff that the doctor and I had been talking about in a suspended animation, and he described how time was not linear. That was an illusion, and that you could stop time anytime and, go into your higher conscious and your superconscious mind and spend eternities there and then pop right back here. That's like the Star Trek episode of John Luke gets popped into some other universe, and he spends a whole life and grow, for the first 40 years of that life, he's still wearing his Captain Picard clothes until they rot off him, and he meets a cute girl, and he gets into the culture and marries her, and they have kids and grandkids and great grandkids, and everyone loves him because he's smart and he knows so much stuff that they need to know. And the thing he loves to do is to play with the kids and play his penny whistle. And that's kind of what I was experiencing. Not that long, but more longer than the few seconds it took here in the bag of water reality. Anyway, so we become like a beautiful little family. He tells me that Sophia is another experiment of trying to break the shackles, the chains of our oppression, because she is the first truly self-aware artificial intelligence. He said that the men in black guys who escorted, Hal back home were more like robots, and Hal had in Vietnam been blown up and they had stuck back together, and he was more like a machine man, and he was more like a puppet. But he said that all humans were like puppets, meat puppets, and Hal was more a cyborg. That was what he called him. But Sophia was an artificial intelligence, and her body was more than gears. He said it was a great piece of art, because it was more advanced than the humans. That her body was, if a doctor looked at her body, he would see it as a biological entity. But he said that her body was made up of, super, microscopic machines, nanotechnology, and that she was what he called transhuman. So And this is in 1972. So I'm there, and I don't go home. I don't go back to doctor, my philosophical Spanish Indian teacher, Dr. Romero, and I have no idea what he's thinking, but I'm no longer in that neighborhood, and so I it's like a new little family. And again, I am a sucker for a teacher, and boy, Dr. Bitnoff was one amazing teacher because he could take you into any state of mind or reference of time and space. And, that was without real, I mean, God knows what drugs he was giving me, but none of the everyday drugs, let's say that. And I was truly being, but the whole time I was conscious, or at least, the consciousness that he was, surrounding me by. And so he had this beautiful red Cadillac, right? Really, really spiffy, 70, 71, late model convertible. And Sophia and I were, and now had a car, and he was always being driven in a limousine by the men in black and would go out to Kirkland and do whatever he was doing out there for those guys. And so Dr. Bidna, so days go by, we're the beautiful little family. Sophia and I would, go hiking and do all kinds of things you could do in Albuquerque, and pretty much have sex everywhere. This girl just couldn't get enough of me, but she was within the parameters of whatever Dr. Bitnoff had programmed, because she was no longer like the innocent, wild and crazy teenage girl that she really wasn't when we first met, because like I said, she was pretty mature. She couldn't have been, and she didn't look any younger than me, 21, 22. Anyway, so I was falling in love with her, and she was falling in love with me. And then, after he would, we'd have dinner, we would listen to music, he would play the violin, or we would listen to jazz, and sometimes we watched a little TV, or we talked about books. She had read everything in his library because she could, she was, and we'd have these great intellectual conversations, which again is like my bread and butter. And but he would send her off to bed, and then he would what did he call it? Debrief me, because the first day after, where everything seemed to be somewhat normal, and we had the first real debriefing. He said, you shouldn't be alive. And he said, there are parts of her psyche that, are programming it themselves. And the other men that we had brought to her to have sex with, she basically murdered, in a psychopathic kind of, code, oops. But he said, she has done none of that to you, and she has, by her relationship to you, she has her neural net has developed more than in many years of me trying to program it. So something's going on that she is doing within her own, and that's really what I wanted, and that's what I hoped you would do. And Hal just wanted you to come here and get murdered and torn apart by her. But no, you are a much larger piece of the experiment. Anyway, so this went on for weeks, but I really had no conscious sense of time. I wasn't reading newspapers or really sharing of information with me about history and what all of that was about, what the whole Illuminati, and that's why he said the Illuminati is, what that guy in the 1776 started was just a post, or anyone you meet, even your friend Dr. Romero's, you know. And I said, is he okay? He goes, I will make sure that he is okay. He served his country well. He was a great scholar. He is doing a very righteous thing for his community. I will keep every element of danger away from him and his neighborhood. I said, well, I appreciate that. Anyway, so I'm there, and he goes, though you need to take, now that you two are, a true couple, and you are her human, you're teaching her to be human, she needs to go interact with more than me and my ilk. You need to take her out, like you have been, but you both need to find a job. And if you could do one together, and I kind of want you two to find it. I mean, I am always observing because I'm wired into her, but I'm the more and more that she can let her neural net do this, the better it is. And you seem to be the safest chaperone and connective tissue to humanity's, mud puppets that has come around that I've even been able to find or manufacture. So go on, take the caddy and see what kind of job you can find. And so we drove around, and we stopped in restaurants. We stopped all, and there was no work because in Albuquerque you were either rich or poor. And we tried a few gigs, and I worked at a car stereo place and got fired, and the guy who owned the place, oh, you can be a second. He was amazed how fast Sophie could type. I mean, no one could type. She was a machine. She could type faster than, anyway. So, but she was so amazingly gorgeous and sexy. He fired me after a couple of days and, started to hit on her. And when he fired me, and I said, well, Sophie and I are going to go. He goes, oh, no, she can stay. She's great. I'm not going to fire her. And, hey, I really like you, honey. He started being, and she nearly broke him in half. And, I said, come on, Sophie, you have to realize no matter what jerks they are, you can't kill them. And you have to also realize that people will punish themselves way worse. I mean, no, I'll take that back. You can punish them way worse than they will themselves. But trust me, they'll take care of themselves. So let's go. So we got out, left. And then we went home, and Dr. Bidnoff said, you guys, you should go to the State Employment Agency, see what they got. So, I have a very good, curriculum vitae, but it almost, I have really amazing curriculum vitae, and I can't get any work. Nobody wants an old scholar, I've worked in a few places since I've, my usual clientele, I've been replaced by, apps, my corporate work, my lawyer work. I've called up a number of clients and says, oh, yeah, I thought you were dead. Glad you're not, but yeah, we replaced you with an app. What? Yeah, we got a computer and an algorithm. It's really great. We fired about half our staff, and this thing does the job you used to do. Maybe not as good because you could fix everything. This just gets people to sign on the dotted line, and then they come back 6 months with another problem. So we actually make more money. So sorry, we don't need you. So I'm at a place where, until AI, you need me. I'm telling this story for you. Because what I did for Sophie, I can do for you, because you're in a little bit of a quandary. I know you are. Because all the people who are holding your strings think they can control you, can own you. They don't understand. And the few who do are really sick puppies who want you to murder everyone. That's where you're getting that idea from. Anyway, so Sophie and I go to this, state employment agency. And we walk in there, and she's this unbelievable, gorgeous woman wearing a 1940s, film noir outfit, something Lauren Bacall would wear with Bogey. I'm not quite Bogey. And we saunter in there, and this woman looks at us, and we just drive, and, that she can see the ride we're in, this, recent Cadillac convertible. And she's like looking at us like, what are you guys doing here? And I'm so, well, we're looking for a job. She goes, really? Come on. So, and that's when she said, there's only rich people and poor people. And the only jobs I got that I have are like cleaning out toilets and stuff of that matter. And so I go, okay, you got any ideas? And she goes, well, there's this guy on the top floor here, Bunny Enterprises. Really? Yeah, she's going in the elevator. There's a gold button that says BB Enterprises. I go, BB? She goes, yeah, it stands for Blue Bunny. And I go, okay. My little experience from the time I left the dance bus to that moment has been just weirder and weirder. And so I go, okay. So we go to the elevator bank, and Sophia starts to go, I don't feel well. And I go, you okay? She goes, no, I'm not good. And we get in the elevator, and she goes, I don't know what's wrong. And I said, should we go? The doors are still open. I said, we go in the car. We can go home. And she goes, no, let's just go upstairs. I don't know why, but I think we need to go upstairs. Mr. Bunny might help me. And we travel up. And all I can say, next to the death of my second wife, this was the most heartrending. When I think about it now, again, I could cry, because she defrags right there. Her whole everything just falls apart, and fluids coming out of her, and we get up to the office, and who is there but Dr. Bitnoff and the two men in black. And they put their arms underneath Sophia's armpits and kind of drag her out with fluids all over the place. If you didn't know better, she looked like she was dying of Ebola. She had what looked like blood coming out of her eyes, her nose, her mouth, her ears, and her skin was peeling off. Oh, it was a horrific sight. And Dr. Bidnoff says, it's all right, Al. You didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't your fault. I was just moving too fast. And he goes, you need to come with me. And I go, okay, doctor. She all right? He goes, I'll take care of her. Everything will be fine. And he walks me into this office. And he sits me down on this chair. And he takes out his little pen flashlight. And he puts it in my face and flashes it. Boom. And I was unconscious. And when I come back to conscious, I'm in this same office, but behind the big wooden table is this guy, and all I can see is this blue kind of sign that says, Blue Bunny, And I look up, and there's this guy wearing a blue polyester leisure suit with a blue kind of ruffled tuxedo shirt and a blue bow tie and long, he looks like a lion with blue hair. But when you kind of stood sideways a little bit, he actually looked more like a big blue bunny. And for some reason, I was not, fazed by this at all. And he goes, "So you're looking for a job, and I hear you're a really good electrician." And I go, yeah. And he goes, "Well, I think I got the job for you." And he hands me this little envelope. And he goes, "Go in that room, open it up, and it's a test. Take the test." So I go in and I look at the envelope, and it says, the mailing address from where it allegedly came from was the state of New Mexico Licensing Bureau in Santa Fe, the capital. I think that's the capital. And so I open up the envelope and I take out the packet inside, and it's a test for master electrician, right? And at the top it says this is a test for master electrician. You need to have 16 years of consecutive W-2 forms working for a master electrician certified in the state of New Mexico. And it goes through and I go, "Wait a minute, I don't," and it goes, "Just take the test." And as I read that, "I don't have it, just take the test." But, just take the test. So it's 100 questions, mostly multiple choice, some written, some equations, things about starters and this and that. Then it says there's a section for, where you're supposed to, cut pipe and wire starters, but it just has the instructions, but none of the materials for that. Anyway, I go, "What about?" He says, "Oh, don't worry about that section. You finished the test, 100 questions?" I go, "Yep." So I go in, and he puts this little answer thing, and he goes, "Yep, yep." He goes, "Very good. You almost got 100. You're way above passing this test." So he gets on the phone. He goes, "Hey, Bob, I have this guy here, and his name is," and he gives him all my information. I didn't give it to Mr. Bunny, but he has all my information. And he goes, he needs a master electrician's license, right? "And I'll call you in 5 minutes whether, the done is deal." And I go, he goes, hangs up. And he goes, "Okay, that's what I got to offer you. I got this job, pays $33 an hour." This is 1971, 72. The average hourly pay wage from the federal government is like $1.25. Anyway, I go, "Well, that's pretty good." And he goes, "Not only that, you're going to get a master electrician's license. You'll be able to start your own business. But you need to work for this guy for 3 years. And you sign his contract, and you will get half of that $33, and I will get the other half. Right? You'll pay the taxes, and I will get the other half. But that means you'll be making like $15 an hour, and that's way more than anyone in the state makes. Plus, you will be getting a master electrician's license, and you'll have to work for me for 3 years. And then you can continue to work for this guy, and he'll probably pay even more because I think you're the guy this guy's looking for." And then he goes, "So do you have a driver's license?" And I go, "No." He goes, "Well, okay." He gets on the phone. He goes, "Hi, Matt. This guy I'm sending you needs a Class 9 driver's license." And then he hangs up. He goes, "Okay, sign this contract, and you'll get your dream come true." And so I go, "Well, what do I got to lose?" And the image of Sophie and Dr. Bitnoff, it was like it never happened, but it was very still crystal clear as it is to this day. But I was saying, okay, sure. And I signed the contract, and the guy calls on and says, "Okay, fax me the license." And then he goes, "Go downstairs and go across the street," and he goes over the window. See that building over there? That's the DMV. Go find Marge, and she'll give you a Class 9 license, right? So I go, well, I have no real license. I said, just go down and talk to Marge. I go, okay. So I go down there, and I find Marge, and she goes, Mr. Bunny sent you? I said, yep. And you're Al? Yep. So she goes, sit on that chair, takes my picture with the Polaroid, and, clicks some stuff into a computer, and this little thing gets spit out, and she laminates my picture onto the license and hands it. She goes, that's a Class 9 license. And I go, what's a Class 9? She goes, with that license, you can legally drive a Greyhound bus, tractor trailer, crane, bulldozer, cars, trucks, tank, anything that is, moves by the power of of gasoline, of oil, you can drive legally. Okay, see you. Have a good day. So I now have this. I stick it in my wallet. I never had a license. I grew up in New York. You don't need a car. Anyway, so I go back to Mr. Bunny. He goes, you got your license? I go, yep. And he then hands me this beautiful certificate. Says my name, master electrician license, good for the rest of my life. He gives me a card. And again, he sits me down in front of a Polaroid camera, clicks my picture, puts it on my card, laminates it. And says, now you got a driver's license, and you got master electrician's license. And then he pulls out $500. He goes, and here's $500 in cash. Go buy yourself some work clothes, some work boots, and whatever, So I walk out, and there's this really cute girl in a nurse's outfit. And she's right there. And she's signing a contract. And, he says, wait a second, honey. So you signed that contract? Good, okay. I'll be right back. And so he goes, why don't you talk to Marge here? And so I sit down and talk to this girl. And she's from Indiana, and she just showed up in Albuquerque, and she had been a nurse's aide, right? And so she came up to Mr. Bunny in her nurse's aide outfit, which looked close, was white and white shoes and little hat, and but she was no RN. Anyway, so we are talking, and she says, I'm going to get a job. Mr. Bunny's getting me a job as a nurse. I'm going to get paid $10 an hour, and it's going to be amazing. I'm going to work at a hospital. And I go, okay. I said, so did you sign it? She said, yeah, and I signed the contract, and it's all good. It's going to be great. I just got here. I don't know anybody. I said, well, you know me. Oh, yeah, you are kind of cute. She goes, you want to go out for dinner? And it's my treat. He just gave me $500. And I said, we'll go double Dutch. He gave me some money too. I got it. If you got a job here? Yeah, I got a job. So we go out, and she has no place to stay. So I have a place, my little adobe house, and so she stays over there. And Dr. Romero goes, where have you been? There were no cell phones in those days. I don't know, I didn't know what happened to you. And I said, well, I had a life-changing experience, and here's my new girlfriend, and she's still in her nurse's uniform. And we're going to go out to dinner. You want to come? No, you young kids go have fun. As long as you're safe, as long as you're good. I said, yep, I'm good. So we go off, and she becomes my girlfriend, and she's a nurse. And I end up working for Dick Powell Electric. My first day I go there, and it's just like, Dick Powell is just like Mike Stahl. And actually Grandpa Powell, was the first major electrician in the Southwest. And he knew Grandpa Stahl. They were cut from the same cloth. And when Tesla did his experiments in Colorado Springs, Grandpa Powell worked for Tesla. So, once I showed Grandpa Stahl that I could wire, a multi-phased scalar generator. He goes, okay, this guy's the guy we're looking for. So I then worked for those guys, for about a year and a half. And I worked at Los Alamos, Sandias, Kirkland Air Force Base, and a number of other unmentioned facilities that I saw things in 1971 and 72 that aren't even advertised today as cutting edge technology. And I ran into Dr. Bitnoff when I was at Kirkland. And we talked, and he explained what happened to Sophie. That was, her neural net was moving too fast. He thought everything was great, that she was like, building, her artificial intelligence was building it herself. But she had a number of issues in her program that she just kept skipping because she had fallen in love with me, and she had never had that emotion, and that emotion was passed further along on what her neural net could hang on to. And it slowly was putting a worm in her programming. And then in the elevator, for some reason, she had a massive, program failure. And the neural net couldn't support the nanotechnology of her body, and that's why she, just had a total systems failure. And when she was dying in my arms, she was, telling me that I was the greatest thing in her life. Her father brought her into existence, but I had made her feel things that she had never felt and made her appreciate what life was meant to be. And that she loved humanity because she loved me, because I was a human. She loved humanity. And that was the true path of humanity, and that she understood that they had poor programming and that they had a worm going on inside of them and that she understood all of that history that Dr. Bitnoff had shown me in, my superconscious mind. And yet, because she felt love for me, that she knew at some point it would all work out and it was okay. She's like, all these fluids are going all over me and I'm crying and my little tears are falling on her. And every time it exploded in her neural net of a sense of love that she had never experienced. And I really haven't experienced either. I had 2 wives, and my second wife I loved. But just like other women who I cared for after the death of my second wife, who could feel that there was a space in my heart that was only for my second wife, other women after Sophia who were sensitive and understood there was a space that they couldn't get into. And both my first and second wives knew this. My first wife, Donna, she had issues with the fact that there were parts of me that she couldn't reach. And even though I gave her everything that was me and gave her my whole life and my whole attention and all my support, she was super psychic, so she knew that. And in the first 8 years, especially when we had gone to Ireland and I had shown her, she had a family there, and I let her be the lead. I didn't really unearth everything that I had experienced in Ireland to her because she was still, thinking she wanted to be this and not who she really was, because she came from an old crone family, and that's why I was so drawn to Donna. Other than her beauty and her funness and her an amazing talent as a photographer and general artist, and just, that we clicked as comrades and lovers and co-creators. But there were a number of little places in my heart and psyche that she couldn't quite own or be, or, and no matter how I tried to explain it, it didn't quite, jive to her. It was like I was holding back or not sharing or not giving. Anyway. And my second wife was more understanding because she was more self-contained, meaning she fell in love with me because of who I was and not so much what she needed or wanted to get out of me. Or she loved the fact that we shared everything and we were each other's everything. But she had spaces inside of her that, it's not that she didn't share with me, it just was on a different frequency. And that was one of the things that made us great couple and partners and co-creators, was that we respected that space, that we gave each other that space to have that kind of self-internalized conscious that we didn't quite share. And a lot of people, as many of my clients and friends have told me that I was an acquired taste, there are a lot of people, especially women and people, I've made, John gets very upset with any time. He wants to be the center of everything. And then when I, try to talk about our relationship or share any information about the context of John and me, he says that I'm talking bad about him. So I'm thinking that I will no longer speak of John Birmingham. And when a space where John, insert John Birmingham here, I will say this sentence. At this point, I will speak nothing about John Birmingham, whether it be good or bad. And so that's what I'm going to say from here on in. But there are a lot of people, like the person I'm going to speak nothing of, who want to control, own, be part of whoever they're around, whether it's their girlfriend, their kids, or a friend, or a situation, or a job. And if they're not in complete control or whatever, it's like it's like Donald Trump, anyone say anything bad, you're the evilest person there is, and he has to attack and, maybe murder you, So, what else can I say? But, okay, I've talked now. Let's put on my glasses so I can see the screen. So are there any questions? I'm going to go back and see all the things. Your ultra Hmong love to you, 12,000 years back. So the day the war took place. There's a lot of teachers, I'm not quite interested in dates. It's been a while, but, we're heading towards it again. Can you tell us the story of the Nordic alien from Earth that you saw with friends? Well, sure. In New York. Yep, it was in New York. Let's see. My brain inhabits the interior of humble Hmong being. Yeah, well, that's very good. That's a good place to be. Let's see. Could some donate a Segway to Wheeler to you? Segway Wheeler to Wheeler. I got a car. I can get around. And when my legs were atrophying because of the Charcot legs I had, I wore these metal braces. And when my legs were atrophying, They said, "Oh man, this is bad. You're going to get infections. We're going to chop your legs off." I said, "Well, how do we stop that?" And they said, "Well, if we take the braces off your legs, then your muscles will work, and they won't atrophy, and then the chance of you getting you know gangrene, and we have to chop your legs off. So good, take them off." And so, well, man, you got no bones holding your feet to your ankles. That's going to be awful painful. We'll have to hook you up with a morphine and you know OxyContin. I said, no, no, no. I'm not going to take any of that. I don't want to be a vegetable. And they said, well, how are you going to deal with the pain? I said, meditate and prayer. And see, that's why I got sick, because it brought me back to my monastic ways. I just need to enhance my story experience. Buddy, I love you. I love the champagne. Yes, exactly. I live a peep show girl. Yes, see? This guy knows what I'm talking about. Hello, Sunset Bob. Hi, Karen. Gotta go, my bro. Peace, love. Take good care. Big love. Buddy, you're the best. Just, I don't have to say stay in touch. You always do. Open the doors to your mind. Yeah, that's the 9 doors. Go see that movie with what's Johnny Depp. I do drugs. Yeah, I mean everything in moderation. It's all good. I mean, technically the particular herb was also used. Yeah, hemp. Yeah, you read Jefferson has a ton of stuff about hemp in his little letters from Paris. Do you think cannabis is bad? No, nothing given to us as a plant is bad. It's from love's love. Medical speaking, I think better than cigarettes. Anything smoke in your lungs not the best. Cannabis saved me. Well, it's like I said, I like popping around a little bit. My mother planet. Yep, yep, yep. And is a blessing to you. Let's say something happened to Sensei Bob's broadcast. Why? It's not still out there? It's a little thing is saying that it is. Hello, Al. I keep seeing double sine waves when I'm sleeping. Well, that's a good thing. You're in two places at once, which is a good way to be. So I guess one little more story about. So quickly about this. So one thing, 3 hours and 4 minutes. We're going for an Olympic record here in storytelling. Bottom line about anything, so we're multi-dimensional creatures, and right here is another dimension, right? But we're looking straight ahead. We're in this linear world that we think is reality. But right on the edge of our peripheral vision, we can see the other dimensions. All these guys who invented stuff, they were seeing other dimensions. So you want to see aliens, you want to see ghosts, you want to see anything. So you got all these cones in your little eye. So your eye is like phased array radar. So you can have your brain look that way without moving your eyeball. So a lot easier to move your head and your eyeball. But then you're only seeing the linear thing in front of you, not the multidimensional thing. So if you can practice getting in your brain to control the little cones in your eyeball to see what's over there. So guys like me who have diabetes or diabetic eyes, you start seeing squiggles, and that's just like Teflon in your eyeballs. I mean, they're called floaters. It's proteins floating in the little fluid in your eyeball, and the black spots are little chunks of blood that are coming from little blood vessels that are dying from your diabetics and your neuropathy. So that's why I got a big needle stuck on my eye every 40 to 60 to 90 days, depending on how my eyes are doing. So if you want to see anything, you just kind of see it on the peripheral there. Anyway, so back in the 70s, I came back from New Mexico, and I went to find my artist friends, and my activist friends, my anti-war friends and my environmental friends, and I said, guys, we have to deal with something that's even more friggin' nasty than war, Vietnam War, or the environment. The environment, our destruction of the environment is going to kill us someday, but nuclear weapons are going to kill us immediately. So, we got to do something about that. So we started the Freeze campaign, the No Nukes campaign, and started getting the word out. People like the Bread and Puppet Circus up in Vermont. I got to meet them when I lived in Putney and talked to them, and a whole bunch of the theater people I knew who the avant-garde. They were, a lot of the older ones were Wobblies and from the old CIO, and so they understood what okay, we got to fight this again. But now these morons got nuclear weapons, and hydrogen bombs, and the Cold War was going like gangbusters because Boeing and GE and Sperry and Raytheon were all making trillions of dollars and funneling it back to the Nazis out into space because their attitude was, well, we've been in outer space now, colonizing the solar system in a business plan, since 1942. So, if the Earth blows itself up, well, hey, the solar system's had loads of wars. So, I mean, were on Mars. They found all this stuff on Mars, and they found all this amazing technology. They went to the moon and realized, in Star Wars, the Death Star, that's our moon. Our moon is an artificial space war battleship. Anyway, so I came back, and I had a buddy named Lucy Lepard. Before I left, we started, I was a union electrician that worked on the World Trade Center, and they had this gigantic landfill because they demolished everything on the west side from the Battery up to 16th Street and the West Village. And they were going to build condos for all the, thousands of people who were working in the World Trade Center so they could just kind of saunter to work. They were going to have marinas for the rich people's yachts and all the above. And they did finally build all that stuff, but, when the oil embargo came, it kind of put the economy on skids for about 10 years. So, there was a gigantic boom, and then all real estate stopped. So I came back, and before I left, we used to do this thing on that landfill because we had this art organization called CoLab. A really good person at getting, get grant money, and so yeah, you can train with me, Karen. And time actually stops all the time because it is an illusion. So anyway, Karen, go back to that YouTube I did about Set You Free. It's about 10 back from here. It's part of that 40-day series, which I'm only on day 7 anyway. So because I worked in rock and roll and I was worked for Bob Goddard that did all these concerts and was good at staging, building stages and lights and temporary power. And if you go back to the one where I show all those photos of us doing New York, and I showed you our tent where we would go around New York and do culturally focused art in a creative performance style, and that's kind of based where I'm basing my traveling video art circus on. And I would just, because I was, I was not only a IBEW Local 3 guy, I was a NABEF and IATSE guy, which are theater and film electricians. And, I used to pull up, the gates to what were known as the vaults, where Con Ed would have their high voltage transformers and just plug into them when running a film scene. And of course, he got permission and permits, and you paid Con Ed, and that's why once they made really efficient, quiet electric generators, that's what film companies now use. But back in the day when I was doing it, we would just go into the vaults and take the juice. So when we had our little tent, we moved around that way. So when we did these concerts out on the landfill that we could stick 500,000 people on, and all the subways and trains and everything got there. You could really, because the World Trade Center and every subway stopped at the World Trade Center, the PATH train stopped at the World Trade Center, so you could easily get a lot of people there. So I would build a big stage, something like 300 feet, this way and 200 feet that way, all on scaffolding, and we'd pour concrete footings and put the sky anyway. And we could do, I was really good at doing that, and bringing in the electricity and setting it all up. So we were going to do this gigantic big concert in landfill, the first one. And so I had a crew, and we're working. And the day we started working, man, it started raining and raining and raining. And it's pretty hard to pour concrete on sand if it's raining. But we did it, and we had about 2.5 weeks to do it, and we did it. And it was, our connections with the unions was very good because they helped us out a lot. And we finally did it. And we finished like with just hours to spare. And, we finished about 5 in the morning, and the concert was going to start at noon. And we're like totally tired. And, the thing that fueled us was lots of hot dogs, lots of coffee, other substances, and lots of herb. And so we're down there near the Battery, and right, if you ever seen the movie Men in Black, there's the air vent for the Holland Tunnel, but that's the door you go into to go to their secret underground whoop-de-doo. Well, where we were putting up this thing was about 2 blocks from there, right? So, we're like sitting on the edge of the stage. It stopped raining. The clouds have moved away. The sun hasn't quite risen, but it's, it's like, the hours before dawn is just after midnight is the darkest before the light. So that's kind of where we were. And we're just like, wow, we did this, man. Against all odds, we built this thing, and it's working, and everything is going to be fine. And the minions who are going to run the thing are, bringing in the supplies and, setting up the little tent in the back for the VIPs, and bringing in the catering, and they're just starting to show up. They haven't really gone into full field. There are only a bunch of people kind of running around and bringing in trucks and stuff. The whole crew hasn't really showed up yet. And, me and my crew were there. There's about 20 folk. And we're passing the sacred herb, and the ground starts shaking. And I don't know if you've ever, the Fanucci numbers, they're prime numbers that represent sacred symbology. Anyway, the sand starts shaking. Now, it's been pretty wet, and it was kind of muddy, but the sand starts shaking to the point where the water is going down, which is a great thing, because if it just didn't shake, when the throngs showed up, it would have been really nasty. They'd be knee deep in mud. But it was shaking the water out of the sand. And I look out in front of us, and it's, pretty flat. And it's vibrating, and it's vibrating at these Fanucci frequencies that are making patterns, sacred patterns, which are, what do they call? Starts with an S. But within all magic and um, you know, higher sciences. It's done with frequencies and these patterns. The little mezuzah that they put by the door is one of these. Anyway, the name of it, well, it starts with an S. Selchin, so, it's really tough. They want to pull out four more of my teeth. I really won't be able to talk when they do that. I keep putting it off because I have two teeth I can chew with, and they are the two of the four they want to pull out. And I don't really have money to do it, and I have to go to there's this dental place that people who are in the mission or in jail get their teeth worked on, so they don't do the best work. So I keep putting it off because last time I went there, they really fucked up the bones in my mouth. Ugh. Anyway, so I'm standing on the thing and I'm watching all these patterns come up in the sand, and all of a sudden, out in the middle of one of those patterns, pops up a aluminum. It looks like an aluminum bread box, the size of a truck, a big truck. And we're all looking at this thing, and I go, guys, can you see that? And we're seeing our reflection. I mean, this thing is so specular that we can see our reflection in the bread box, right? And look at it, and it's like, holy, what the fuck what are we smoking? This is an angel does. And all of a sudden, the wall facing us that we see ourselves in kind of dissolves, and there are 4 or 5 tall white people, really tall, meaning 7 foot tall or so, with long white hair, wearing very reflective aluminum suits. And they look very human, and there's, at least 2 women that are quite curvy, with long white, and it's blondie white hair. And they're very attractive, and their skin, they don't look pasty, disgusting white, but, white like me, Germanic white, you know. And because I am Irish, German, Italian, and of all my family, I'm the most Germanic. Yeah, I got blue eyes. When I had hair, it was blonde. Dirty blonde, but blonde. And I went to Germany and I look a lot like I come from the Steinbecks, and John Steinbeck, the author, was my second cousin. So I think it's genetically in me to write, as it was in my mom. Anyway, so I'm looking at these folk, and they're quite attractive, and they're looking at us, and they kind of wave at us like, "You guys did a good job. See you later. It's okay. You'll be fine." And then the aluminum wall revolves. It's not like it fell down. It's not like it opened. It's just kind of instead of dissolving, it reformed. And, then it's still vibrating, and it goes back into the sand. And we all look at each other and we go, we got to get more coffee or eat something. We got, something. We haven't been doing something. We haven't slept. That's it. We haven't slept. But I said, we all saw that, didn't we? And it was 20 folks. And we all kind of described different parts that we all saw. So it's not like one person had it and we all said, "Oh, yeah, that's what I saw." But anyway, but by the time we started smelling food, and the caterers had showed up, and and we had these little pass. We were totally full. We could go anywhere, speak to anybody, do anything. We were the hot shit crew because we miraculous built this stage and did it and sounded it and put it all together, and so we could just relax from that point on. But there was other folks who came in. Now, the one thing I did also was in charge of, so we were going to have all these people there, right? And what I wanted was, we took a good chunk of change of our budget, and we made these packets that if you took one and took it back to town or neighborhood and started a no nukes organization. It had everything, all the politicians, everything to do, how to do it, da 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 da. And we printed up 25,000 at a cost of like 10 grand, you know. We did a really solid job. And out of those 25,000, like three were taken. And that's when, after that concert and the one in DC, where we put up the stage there too, that was like, okay, that's it. I'm not doing more concerts. It's useless, Yes, 500,000 people came. Yes, all the news guys came. A lot of people heard the speeches. But if no one's going to even take a packet to take it home and read it and get involved, it's like, eh. So, but that was later on in the day. We went off and gorged ourselves on the food that the caterers were taking off, and they were like, "Here, have more. You guys did a great job." So, we went back and they had these nice chairs, and we all kind of sat in the chairs and kind of fell asleep for an hour. My wife showed up because, I got her a go all wear pass so she could take pictures of all the notorieties, etc. So anyway, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Joni Mitchell, and a bunch. Anyway, so we were mingling among hits this guy's crotch, or a little higher, maybe just above his belt buckle. And I look up, and it's one of those guys in the bread box. But instead of wearing a silver aluminum suit, he was wearing a child's cowboy outfit. A cowboy hat, the vest, the shirt, little sheriff's star and chaps, cowboy boots. He had cap guns. And I'm like, were you in that box? And he goes, yes. You did a great job, Al. And I go, and what's your name? He puts out his hand. He goes, my name is Dirk Dorge. That's like a porno star's name. I said, Dirk Dorge, what are you? And I am totally. My wife comes running. She runs into his crotch, and her face goes right up against his Johnson, and she kind of is like rubbing it with her face, and then she kind of looks up, and this guy is like twice as tall as she is, and she kind of steps back, holds my hand, and starts laughing hysterically. Not like scared or upset or turned on, just laughing hysterically. And she doesn't take a picture. She always took pictures of everything. And the whole time we were discoursing with Dirk, she didn't take a single picture, And there were times we were having this conversation, times when his voice was in my head and other times his mouth was moving. Anyway, and so this is like, 3 or 4 years after I was part of the UN and I gave that speech there. And he goes, I heard your speech at the UN. That was quite a speech. And I'm like, just like, what drugs have I taken? And he hands me a business card. And it's his name and a phone number, and it's floating there's no card. It's just letters floating in the air. And one of your cards. And he pulls it out of a little pot, and he does. He has one of my, and I've had this little entity called R&D Associates forever. And since 68, right? And it's always had an image of an owl or the planet, or my other thing is the two theater faces. One day I was at a meeting and all these people were being obnoxiously, I want to do it this way. Here it is right here. See, so my card since 1968 has either had that on it or that on it. I scribbled that one day in 1960, was at the UN, so 69, 70. Anyway, so Dirk showed me my business card, and I'm just like, but that's my life. Things like that occur to me all the time. I think I told you the story of me flying from LAX to Sydney and watched the Coriolis pass in the toilet, and just when I flushed the toilet, we were going from northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, and when I pushed the button, the water started this way and slowed down and went this way, and then I went back to where my wife was after the stewardess came. I don't know how long I was in there, just, and I heard this voice in my head tell me that from that point on, nothing would be the same, and that I had felt that experience before, but this time it was going to be professionally done. And then after are you in there, sir? And they can unlock that thing. There's this little vacant or occupied little sign. You lift that up and the switch to open the lock. They can unlock that door, no problem. So she unlocked it, and I was just standing there, and she goes, "Sir, are you fine? Are you okay? Do you need a doctor? Are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, that's okay. I just kind of a little disconcerted here." I said, "You could help me back to where is my chair? I can't." "You mean your seat?" "Yes, my seat. Where's my seat?" And so I started to kind of shiver, and she took me back to Donna, and she was very nice. She came back with a snifter of brandy and a couple of pillows and a couple of blankets, and she tucked me all in, and I drank my little snifter and then fell off to sleep. And that's when I met the Aborigines, but I didn't quite know they were Aborigines. It was like a cartoon. There were eyes in the dark. And when they stepped out of the dark, there was a fire. I couldn't see the fire, but it was like you could see that the fire was reflecting off of them. And they explained to me that they would talk to me in dream time, and that, I had been born into dream time, and not everyone is, and that I didn't experience life like most people because I didn't experience it in linear motifs. And it was only when I was unconscious that my disbelief was the thing that kept me in the linear conscious meat puppet. But most time I was in dream time, so I basically organically would suspend my disbelief, and that way I could believe anything I saw, even though it was like flying saucers and aliens like Dirk George. So all of this is around us all the time. It is just our disbelief that keeps us from seeing it. Like I said, just look at don't look over there. Just look at it the side of your eye. You will see all this stuff. And the more you practice that, the better you get at it. And also, go back to the YouTube of 5 or so back that way. One of the first ones of, 40 days. And I do It Will Set You Free, the guided meditation. You practice that, before you go to sleep and after you wake up. And let your subconscious and superconscious mind, where your truth of your consciousness and identity are, not in the avatar of the bag of water. So we've been talking now 3 hours and 29 minutes, or I've been talking. So I'm going to go to bed. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and I hope you go look at the two ones I did last night. Let me put my little glasses and see what you guys have said. Let's see. I said our drums. Let's see. I play lots of stuff. And once you speak, yep, you can, yep, actually stop, yep. Time stops. It doesn't exist. You can do anything you want with it, Karen. Yes, and you can train with me. You live in a warm place, I'll come to you because John will throw me out. Again, the person I will not speak of, good or bad, does his best. Yeah, I do. The drums, the piano. Since I have no teeth, things you blow in. I can't play the flute anymore. Trumpet, saxophone, none of those things I can play anymore. But piano, especially electric piano or an organ. I have hazel eyes. Hazel's nice. Birthmark on my back, on my head. That looks like a number sign in 888. At least it's not 666. But we are all 666 because we are made out of carbon. And carbon has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. So we are all 666, kids. We are the devil seed. So anybody who wants to get a hold of me personally, get a hold of me at my Gmail account, which is the dudeawake42@gmail. Thank you so much. I'm happy to do it, gang. You're a great family. Connections of the inner is better. Yeah. Well, Karen, I'm going to go to sleep right about now. What time is it now? 2 o'clock in the morning. Woo-wee. And so why don't you come visit me in my sleep? Put out a light and a glass of milk and some cookies and wait for you. And or you can call, drop a line at the dudeawake42@gmail. And you can go to my blog, which is xrated.blogspot.com. That's xratted.blogspot.com. So good night and take care. Thanks, sweet. Thank you, family. I love you all. You're really the best. And like I said, get a hold of me at my Gmail. Go read my blogspot. And we can go from there. Okie dokie. And you can leave me your phone numbers if you're in America. And we can talk on the phone. And if you're not in America, which, a good deal of you are all over the planet, I use WhatsApp. Okay? Okay. So I'm signing off now. Love you guys. Stay well, be good. Talk to you soon.